listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, the big question: are Labour the new nasty party? Because yesterday, nearly 100% of Labour MPs voted to axe the pensioners' winter fuel allowance. And today, GB News asked Rachel Reeves, is Labour the new nasty party? You will not want to miss her answer. Plus, on today's show, I'll be joined by two very worried pensioners in their 80s, plus one of their carers, who share their fears about a looming winter of discontent. And on last night's presidential TV debate in America, Donald Trump made the extraordinary claim that illegal immigrants are eating pets, such as cats and dogs. Does this story have legs, or is it a barking mad conspiracy theory? And new figures show that the UK has given away a staggering £7.8 billion to Ukraine since the start of the war. Bear in mind, the winter fuel allowance was a mere £1.4 billion. On top of that, a worrying new report shows that training Ukrainian troops on British soil is draining a quarter of our own capability to drill our own soldiers. When will Britain start to look after itself first? And that's all coming up in your next hour. What's the show? Always a pleasure to have your company. So today is all about pensioner power, giving the power back to pensioners, listening to their voices. I've been inundated with your messages of pensioners very, very concerned about what the winter fuel allowance being cut means for you. Today, I'll speak to a host of pensioners to tell me their concerns, to pass on their messages to their MPs who voted to axe their winter fuel allowance, and also so they have a direct pipeline to Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. By the way, we sat down with Rachel Reeves for today's show. Chris Hope, our political editor, asked the question, is the Labour Party the new nasty party? Let me know what you think on that topic the usual way, gbnews.com/your say. But now your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 3 o'clock. The government has announced a public inquiry into the 1989 murder of Belfast solicitor Pat Finucane. He was killed in his home, and investigations found the attack involved collusion with the state. The 39-year-old's family, who've campaigned for decades, welcomed the move, with his son John posting on social media, "Today is for my father." But DUP leader Gavin Robinson criticised the inquiry, claiming it perpetuates a hierarchy of victims in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Now, Rishi Sunak's reignited the battle against Labour on its move to axe a winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners. Continuing his focus from last week's exchanges at Prime Minister's questions, the Conservative leaders pushed Sir Keir Starmer for details on the impact of the cuts.
We know why he's hiding the impact assessment. The Labour Party's own previous analysis claimed that this policy could cause 3,850 deaths. So are the numbers in his impact assessment higher or lower than that?
However, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer pushed back, claiming his government was having to clear up the Conservatives' mess.
Because of the tough decisions that we're making to stabilise the economy, we can make sure that the triple lock shows that increases in pensions will outstrip any loss of payments. But before he complains about us clearing up his mess, perhaps he'd like to apologise for the £22 billion black hole.
Meanwhile, this morning, our political editor, Chris Hope, asked the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, if the looming October budget will be more bad news for pensioners.
We've committed to those bus passes, to free TV licences for those entitled, and free prescriptions. But we've also committed to the triple lock, not just for 1 year, but for the duration of this Parliament. And that means that pensions will continue to rise by whichever is higher, 2.5% inflation or average earnings. That means that pensioners have £900 more this winter and likely another £460 from next April.
In other news, the Business Secretary has unveiled a multi-million-pound package to support Tata Steel's shift to greener production. Jonathan Reynolds blamed the previous government for failing to make critical decisions. However, the Conservatives are accusing Labour of extending a deal they once criticised. Jonathan Reynolds says the new agreement includes investment opportunities to secure long-term jobs, despite up to 2,800 positions being at risk.
Tata are agreeing to offer a comprehensive training programme for any employee as an alternative to those at risk of compulsory redundancy. This would be on full pay for 1 month and then £27,000 a year per employee for 11 months. And Tata will fund all of these costs. Employees will be able to choose from recognised qualifications to develop sought-after skills which will be in high demand in the local economy now and long into the future.
Now, no-fault evictions could soon be history as the government prepares to ban Section 21 evictions. The Renters' Rights Bill, set to be introduced today, promises sweeping changes to protect England's 11 million renters. It will also force private landlords to take faster action on unsafe housing conditions. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner says the bill will overhaul renting and tackle unfair practices, but landlords warn the reforms must be fair to both sides. And Donald Trump and Kamala Harris clashed on crime, immigration, abortion and the economy in their first and possibly only presidential debate. The showdown began with a handshake but quickly took a turn when Harris mocked Trump's rallies, accusing him of boring his crowds. Trump hit back, defending his popularity and attacking Harris on her immigration stance and economic policies.
She's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it?
Harris blamed Trump for nationwide abortion restrictions and the Capitol riot while questioning his fitness for office.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Those are the latest headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Let's get stuck into our show today. It's all about pensioner power today, and we've heard from the Prime Minister after a tense day yesterday in the House of Commons. MPs voted to scandalously cut winter fuel payments for old age pensioners. The Conservatives and Reform are vowing to name and shame Labour Party MPs who voted, in their words, to freeze your grandparents, as ministers doubled down on their decision to scrap winter fuel payments for 10 million British pensioners. Now, lest we forget, in 2017, Angela Rayner tweeted this. She tweeted that will Theresa May confirm that 10 million pensioners would lose their winter fuel payments if the Tories are re-elected? Well, they weren't re-elected. You were in power, Angela Rayner, and your party decided to exit. Well, 10 million pensioners are about too, but I thought you cared about this country's pensioners. And also, from 2017, this is what Rachel Reeves had to say. There's a message on screen there. I'll never forget a woman in Leeds West I spoke to who had purple fingers because her pension wasn't enough to pay for the heating. We must act now. This is the same Chancellor, Rachel Reeves now, whose idea it was to axe the winter fuel payment. And it just keeps getting worse and worse for the Labour Party. Joining me now is our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, an astonishing day yesterday. You were sterling, brilliant work in Westminster Hall, reporting on this all day. The votes came in live on the show. I was staggered by them. I was staggered by the fact that so many first-time Labour Party MPs followed the party line. 348 out of 348, 100% of the MPs who voted to axis, they are all from the Labour Party. Quite simply, Chris, my question is the Labour Party the new nasty party?
Well, they certainly have their fingers dipped in the blood, to use a kind of Shakespearean sort of Caesar analogy. They've been made to back the government on a policy which will be the first attack line at the next election. Again, 4 or 5 years away, but still a problem. Already we're seeing social media posts from Tory MPs or Tory candidates at the next election saying, your MP voted for this. How do you feel about that? Earlier, I spoke to Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor in Silverstone, and I asked her that actual question. Is Labour the new nasty party? Here's what she had to say.
We'll come to the economy in a minute, but just about the vote yesterday in House of Commons on the winter fuel allowance. The fact is that 348 Labour MPs voted to make pensioners colder this winter. Is Labour now the nasty party?
Well, this government faced a £22 billion black hole in the public finances, but we were determined to protect the poorest pensioners, which is why pension credit and the winter fuel payment will continue to be paid to those pensioners who most need the support. But in addition to that, we committed to the triple lock in our manifesto, not just for 1 year, but for the duration of this Parliament. And the triple lock means that this winter, the new state pension is worth £900 more than it was a year ago.
Rachel Reeves there talking to GBNews for me earlier. I mean, I think interesting. There's figures around here. You've got these figures from the GBNews survey today. There are 70 new swing seats where the new Labour MP has voted in favour of this measure. 90% of pensioners there will lose their winter fuel payment. People will not forget this. I do think it will turn into something akin to the increase in the tuition fees, which damaged the Lib Dems so much. And also the issue, remember that 75p increase in the pension that Gordon Brown for? These things become sort of symbolic of almost an austerity Labour Party, and the choice they made here to save 1.3 to 1.5 billion a year, is it worth it? I also, in that same interview available now on GB News' website, I said to her, if all 800,000 people who haven't signed up for the pension credit do so, will that wipe out the saving? She said, well, she accepted that line and said
more than wipe it out.
More than wipe
three
it out.
times.
But she said she'd rather it was paid to the right people than the wrong people. So despite that fact, remove everybody but get the money into the right pockets is the government's line.
But that doesn't quite add up with the previous statement of if we didn't axe the winter fuel payment, there'd be a run on the pound. It would destroy the market. They've made it out as a fiscal decision. Yet, hey, presto, It's not.
It feels that she's doing it on point of principle. There's talk in amongst MPs, Rebel MPs, this lunchtime. I've been talking with them. They're saying that she's been talking about this privately for a few years now. So I'll look into that further. If we have evidence that the Chancellor has looked into this idea of getting rid of the universal benefit, that's interesting. They say clearly that this idea came to the government when they saw the state of the finances, the £22 billion black hole.
A lot of people will be saying that doesn't add up when you look at the £10 billion given to the 5.5% public service pay rise, NHS workers, teachers, £500 million to junior doctors, £100 million to train drivers, many of whom are on 70 grand a year anyway. And that GB News analysis you picked up there, it's an astonishing piece of work. And it analyses who will be impacted the hardest. As you said, 70 new Labour seats, first-time Labour seats, swung from the Tories and the SNP. 90% of pensioners in those seats are set to lose their winter fuel allowance. And Chris, when you look into where they are, there's a lot in the south-west, a lot in Northumberland, a lot in Scotland. I bet you they're going to be disproportionately impoverished, disproportionately cold. A lot of them are up north, and therefore this is going to hit them hard. I think the IEPs in these seats in particular are going to be very, very disgruntled.
And they won't forget, because if you're losing £300 a year, that's a problem. Now, the government says that we are increasing the state pension, but of course that's only really going out by about 5% because we're keeping pace with the increase of stuff in shops, inflation. This is on top of that, and that's what's being lost. That's why many, I mean, we're seeing in our postbag at GB News, so many viewers, listeners so upset.
And on that precise point, please stick around. I want to meet my next guest now. So how is scrapping the winter fuel allowance going to impact pensioners? Well, I'm delighted to say now I'm joined by Catherine Plant, who's the carer for her father, Douglas, and I believe in Crossland now in Derbyshire. Catherine, welcome to you and your magnificent father, Douglas, there. Thank you so much. I know you got in touch with me earlier on today on our website when you saw that we were trying to campaign on this issue, and I wanted to invite you on today, Catherine, to tell your story and to tell your father's story and why this cruel cut will impact you so hard.
Hi, and thank you for having me on the show, Martin. Well, basically, my father's, he'll be 84 this coming December. He's recently just come out of hospital. He needs this winter fuel allowance, obviously, to keep him warm, basically. And I'm just upset and disgusted that Labour have actually done this.
And you live in a part of Derbyshire, and you said to me earlier on your house is particularly difficult to heat. It's a big open space, and so you need to keep your heating on. You're the primary carer. You live in with your father, and this will mean you having to make other sacrifices, won't it, Catherine, in your father's care? Tell us about that.
It is, well, yeah, it is a big open plan house. There's no doors in the main living area. It's all open plan. So in the winter, I can come down at 7 in the morning, put the heating on, and it's still cold by mid-afternoon. Cut back. I'm going to have to cut back now. We have carers that come in 4 times a day. I'm going to have to cut that back to 3 times a day to make way to have extra money, just to try and put money aside for the winter fuel, because that's now £300 that we've lost. So it's now coming out of our own pockets to try and meet that.
Catherine, I'm with our political editor, Chris Hope. We'd like to ask you a question, please.
Okay.
Douglas, Catherine, hi, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming on the channel. If I can ask you one question, I'll be seeing senior Labour politicians at the party conference and hopefully the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. I wondered if there's a question that Douglas, or you on behalf of Douglas, would like me to ask the Prime Minister directly.
Yeah, why have you done it, basically? I mean, I followed the manifestos of every single party in the run-up to number 10. This was not part of the Labour manifesto. Why have you done it now? I think it's a dirty trick, and you basically sealed the fate of thousands and thousands of pensioners, much like my father. And I want to know why. Why have you done it?
And can I ask, Catherine, you may not want to say, but how do you vote in elections? Do you vote Labour or a different party?
No, I won't. I didn't vote Labour, and I will never vote Labour after what they've just done. I did, for the first time, actually vote for the Liberal Democrats because their manifesto, I think I voted with my heart this time because I don't know his name, unfortunately, but the leader of the Liberal Democrats is a carer himself for his disabled son. So that struck a chord with me. So I did vote for the Democrats.
And Catherine, analysis that GB News have done has shown that in seats such as where you live, you're in Derby North, right? You're in Derby South, little over. So your local parliamentarian is Baggy Shankar. He's Labour. He voted to scrap the winter fuel allowance. So your local MP voted to get rid of the £200 that you rely upon, so evidently to take care of your father as the primary live-in carer. What do you think about the political class when they make decisions like this that impact people like you at grassroots level, and they impact you so hard, and now you're looking down the barrel of a long, cold winter of discontent?
Yeah, I think they're so far removed, they don't get the full impact of what their actions are doing. And if I could say to Baggy, I hope you're pleased with yourself. Why did your conscience not allow you to vote against this? I said, really, really, really not pleased.
Catherine Plant, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for reaching out to us this morning. I can tell you're emotional. Just sending you a huge amount of love and to your wonderful dad there. You know, please keep up the good work. Let's stay in touch, and we're going to make sure Chris Hope is sat here. Yeah. He has the ear of the Prime Minister. We can try and get that comment to the Prime Minister on your behalf. We can try and play that video of you doing this. Chris, do you want to step in and just reaffirm?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, that's what I'll be doing, and we might even try and get along to number 10 today and ask a question and give an answer back on the programme in the next hour.
OK, we're going to try.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Catherine.
Now, Catherine Plant, Douglas, thank you so much for joining us on the show. You take care. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Oh,
I know.
What can you say, man? This is like real politics affecting real people. Well, I've lots more on that story throughout the show, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. You've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country. Now, complete change of gear now. It's time for the Great British Giveaway and the biggest cash prize we've ever given away. £36,000 could be yours, and that's like having an extra £3,000 tax-free in your bank account each month for an entire year. And here's the details that you need to make it yours.
Watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, as 2,000 prisoners are released from jails across the country, what impact will this have on victims to see these people back on their streets? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Akweer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So Prince Harry, apparently, Operation Bring Harry In from the Cold. Do you feel there's any truth to this?
Lots of tongues are wagging, Nana. We heard that he was at the memorial for Lord Robert Fellows, and obviously William was there as well. And so there was lots of, everyone going into overdrive. That was in Snettisham, Norfolk the other day. And he wasn't going to attend, said the People, a mouthpiece of his. And I would have actually thought that maybe a lookalike had turned up. But now we have been led to believe that Harry's been talking to people from friends from his old life, and it's not that he wants to make a permanent move to the UK, so I believe. What I've heard, it's more about his reputation.
Well, he wants to have his cake and eat it, by the sounds of it. I mean, obviously, no good cake it remains uneaten.
We know that the royal family is his currency. I mean, even his late mother, you know, obviously he's almost usurped her memory, and he needs this. He needs this to make money. Of course, he raced in to Lord Robert Fellowes' memorial service. So there's lots of ambiguous behaviour, and he is going to be, you know, in New York. We call it the silly season, don't we? And we're also looking that there's lots of different stories that are coming out. But he needs to sell stuff. He's going to be in New York, and it's you know, we've got to remember the enormous amount of hurt and offence. I mean, Prince William absolutely reeling. Poor Princess Catherine. You know, Spare book coming out at the most awful time, and you've got the Netflix
series.
You know, it's absolutely, this is a rehabilitation strategy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's approaching 3:25. I'm on Daubney on GB News, and I've still got the breath taken away from me by that previous interview there with Catherine Plant and her dad, Douglas. They just reached out to me today on social media. I'm so proud of that kind of work we do on GB News. We're the People's Channel. And when politics drives into people's lives like this in such a cruel way as they see it, I think it's our job to try and hold power to account, to give voice to the people, especially pensioners. And we've got more of that coming later in the show. I'll be speaking to another old gentleman in his 80s who takes care of his wife with Alzheimer's, who wants to tell us about how this cut, this cruel cut as he sees it, has impacted him. Oftentimes it feels like these decisions taken in total isolation in that place over there behind us in Westminster, they don't seem to live in the real world. They don't seem to understand. And this astonishing report looked at by GB News, if you recall, over the last couple of days, I've had David Pinless on the show. He's the founder of the Pensioners Vote. He's done a list of shame of every MP across the land, how they voted. Those who abstained, 53 abstained, of course, 34 of those from the Labour Party, and 348 out of 348 who voted to scrap this winter fuel allowance. They were all, 100% of them, from the Labour Party. And as we delve deeper into it, which I promise you we will continue to do, this story is not going away. This is not the kind of thing you can just throw out there and expect the British public just to swallow and move on. Oh, it's tomorrow's chip paper. No chance. This is a story we're going to keep looking at. And today, GB News can reveal of 70 new Labour seats, 70 MPs of those 348 seats were returned as first-time Labour parliamentarians in seats that swung away from the Conservatives, swung away from the SNP. And the data shows 90% of pensioners in those constituencies are set to miss out on their winter fuel allowance. And when you delve into them a bit further, you see there is disproportionate amounts of poverty, disproportionate amounts of cold. A lot of these seats are in Scotland or in Northumberland. We're going to make sure we keep naming and shaming and fighting for you, the great British pensioners. Now, moving on, Labour unleashed 1,700 prisoners onto the streets yesterday in efforts, they say, to tackle the overcrowding crisis. For some, it was cause for celebration.
Everyone's been happy today. I'm sure coming out there, haven't they? There's been a lot of happy people faces in the house. That's for sure.
Yeah. So you're grateful to Labour and you're grateful to the
100%. Yeah. I'm Labour, vote Labour all my life.
Yeah.
Labour's the one.
That's what you call champagne socialism, popping corks and straight out of the nick to vote for the Labour Party. Now, thousands of prisoners could be placed in taxpayer-funded hotels. But how does this make the public feel seeing prisoners released in this manner? Well, joining me now is Pastor Lorraine Jones-Burrell, the co-founder of the Make It Stop campaign. Welcome to the show, Lorraine. Pleasure to have you. Now then, tell us about the organisation you run. I understand you work with those newly released from prison.
Yes, most definitely. I've been working with ex-offenders for a number of years now. And one of the things which is of most importance is the rehabilitation back into the community. We understand that the Prime Minister has, ordered the release of a number of prisoners. In the community, we want to see the resources where we can work with individuals so that they do not reoffend and go back into prison.
And Lorraine, the director of the probation service, yesterday said it's inevitable that they'll be reoffending. We know 25% of cases reoffend. Anyway, do you think that the early release of people will increase their likelihood of reoffending? Because, as you know, they're perhaps not prepared for that quick transition back to life on the streets.
Well, there will definitely be, they will definitely reoffend if they have not got that support, like I said. But you've got grassroots organisations. My organisation is Dwayne Simpson Foundation. The Make It Stop campaign is a new campaign that I've launched with Ramila Arba, and we are working with a number of brilliant organisations that can help with the rehabilitation. What I would like to say to the Prime Minister is, please reach out to us. Let us be of help. I'm supporting a mother, Martin, and I have to say this. She lost her daughter. She was approached by a beggar. She didn't give him any money. He robbed her phone and stabbed her multiple times to death. Now, our organisation are working with those that are going through the tremendous struggle in the community. We can help, but we need to have the resources to be able to facilitate what is needed by what our Prime Minister has allowed.
I'm sort of speechless. People like you you're the bridge, you're the barrier, you're the buffer between, such pain and the government. Your work sounds astonishing. Tell me more about it.
Yeah, well, Martin, I don't know if you know, I lost my son, Dwayne, to knife crime. The judge ruled in the case that my son died a peacekeeper because he saved a young boy from being stabbed. My son started a boxing gym, Martin, to help vulnerable young people in the Lambeth community. It was those young people, after my son was killed, that pleaded with me to keep the gym going. I've been keeping the gym going, that's Dwaynomics Boxing Club in Lambeth, for 9 years, Martin. I've now got a community centre where we are helping young people around education, the arts, music, as well as providing an after-school club. I'm working closely with Una, who is the principal for Evelyn Grace Academy. And like I've said, recently, Ramila Arba has joined forces with me to help us make the violence stop. But I don't think that we should shy away from the challenges that ex-offenders have. They've been incarcerated. I don't know how long some of these ex-prisoners have been incarcerated. We know we're struggling in the society with the cost of living. How will they cope? We don't want a further increase of robberies, muggings. We know the police are overstretched. So with such a decision, what we want to see is the support from our Prime Minister so that we can get the job done in helping these prisoners that have been released. We've rolled up our sleeves. We want to help. I've got children, Martin. I've got grandchildren. I'm born in the UK. This is my home. We want to see a society that is low on violence, low on crime, and thriving. And we can do this if we work together, Martin.
I think you're an astonishing human. I feel totally blown away by what you just said. Pastor Lorraine Jones-Burrell, co-founder of the Make It Stop campaign. Please, let's stay in touch. Please come in the studio. Please, let's try and work together I think you're amazing.
Okay.
You've just blown me away today. Thank you so much for your work. What a start to the show. What an emotional first 30 minutes. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. As Labour's first big budget approaches, businesses around the country are fearful that those with the most assets will be the hardest hit. So what does the future hold for our farmers? It's an astonishing story. Stay tuned. But first, your latest news headlines. It's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom at 3:30. These are your headlines. The government has announced a public inquiry into the 1989 murder of Belfast solicitor Pat Finucane. He was killed in his home, and investigations found the attack involved collusion with the state. The 39-year-old's family, who've campaigned for decades, welcomed the move, with his son John posting on social media, "Today is for my father." But DUP leader Gavin Robinson criticised the inquiry, claiming it perpetuates a hierarchy of victims in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Labour is facing mounting pressure from within its own ranks to reverse cuts to the winter fuel payment. In today's exchanges at Prime Minister's questions, Rishi Sunak pushed Sir Keir Starmer for details on the impact of the cuts, which will see 10 million pensioners lose the payment. Despite the opposition, the Prime Minister insists it's necessary to fix a £22 billion financial shortfall. This morning, our political editor, Chris Hope, asked the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, if the looming October budget will be more bad news for pensioners.
We've committed to those bus passes, to free TV licences for those entitled, and free prescriptions. But we've also committed to the triple lock, not just for 1 year, but for the duration of this Parliament. And that means that pensions will continue to rise by whichever is higher, 2.5% inflation or average earnings. That means that pensioners have £900 more this winter and likely another £460 from next April.
And no-fault evictions could soon be history as the government prepares to ban Section 21 evictions. The Renters' Rights Bill, set to be introduced today, promises sweeping changes to protect England's 10 million renters. It will also force private landlords to take faster action on unsafe housing conditions. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner says the bill will overhaul renting and tackle unfair practices. But landlords warn the reforms must be fair to both sides. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, we've already had an astonishing response from you out there, the beautiful GB News viewers, to our first half hour. Catherine Plant and her father, Douglas, who've missed out on their winter fuel allowance, has really got you going. Please add your voices to that, and we'll make sure we give you your say. Go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. It feels more like October or November out there today. Distinctly chilly winds, a few sunny spells, but also most places seeing plenty of showers. Here's the reason why: low pressure sitting up to the northeast and north or northwesterly winds, bringing the air down, bringing that chill and bringing plenty of showers packing in over northwest England, extending down to the Midlands, north and west Wales, northern and western parts of Scotland. Parts of eastern England, southwest England and southeast Scotland may not see any showers, could stay largely dry and bright here, but elsewhere expect showers to come and go, and everywhere you can expect to feel the chill. Temperatures struggling into the mid-teens at best. It feels even colder with that wind, which will be quite gusty, particularly close to the showers. A few are likely to filter down towards the southeast through this evening and maybe the southwest as well, but lots of showers for Wales, northwest England, coming and going across Northern Ireland. Northeast England, southeast Scotland may well be mostly dry through the afternoon, but the showers continuing to come in across northern and western Scotland, where the winds are strongest. It really does feel chilly out here, and it's going to be a pretty cold evening and an even colder night. We'll continue to see some showers drifting in over north and west Wales, northwest England, but they should tend to ease across the Midlands. Showers keep going in northern Scotland, but many areas just becoming clear. The winds will ease a touch as well, and that will allow those temperatures to drop 5 or 6 degrees. That's towns and cities, many rural areas not far off freezing, in fact below across a good part of rural Scotland. So yes, a real chill for Thursday morning. Another day of sunshine and showers, but not as many showers. Still plenty for north and west Wales and northern Scotland, but a dry day for southwest Scotland, northwest England. And again, much of the east will be dry and fine. Chilly, but the winds won't be as strong tomorrow.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Issues either side of the M6 this afternoon. Firstly, southbound at junction 10. That's the turn off of Wolverhampton and Walsall. Now 2 lanes are coned off to assist a breakdown. The queues back to the M54 interchange at 10A. On the northbound side of the M6, with all the traffic currently being held, is from the Cawley services up towards the M42 turn off junction 4 for Coleshill. It's to sort a collision out, so it's causing queues. Emergency bridge repairs. Northbound M5 at Taunton 25. Means currently the inside lane of 3 is coned off and it's queuing. Northbound side of the M42, Birmingham Airport at 6, up towards junction 7 for Coleshill. There's overrunning roadworks causing queues back to junction 5, and queuing between Wales and England either side of the Prince of Wales Bridge in the ongoing roadworks. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, as Labour's first budget approaches, businesses around the country are fearful that those with the most assets could be the hardest hit. Reports suggest that Labour are considering changes to inheritance tax. There are currently several exemptions, including on agricultural land and family businesses, but these could be lifted to include them. GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has his report on the concerns farmers have with this potential looming tax.
Sam Hanna is a third-generation farmer who will eventually take over the business. But to stay competitive, he has had to put in substantial investment.
Milking parlour, buildings and all would have been 300 to 350,000. We've invested, had a loan for 100,000 on it to try to improve the farm, make it more economic and more beneficial towards us going forward. We already pay our income tax each year, and our assets are also included in our income tax each year. So if we have more assets or more stock or more machinery, that's all taken into our tax bill. So if we're going on till an inheritance tax or go in that direction, why should we be paying tax on stuff that's already been taxed every year?
In 1974, Harold Wilson scraped into power. He immediately settled with the unions, but to pay the bill, he introduced the capital transfer tax, designed to tax those with assets. Family businesses and farms were hit the hardest, and this drove up the price of food and hampered economic growth. In 1986, Thatcher's government reversed the policy. But if it returns, who will benefit the most?
If you find that small farms and farmers are going to have to sell off land, who's going to buy it? The people who want to be virtuous and say we're offsetting our carbon output by having trees planted on ground or buying land or whatever. It's big companies who are going to do that. Odd that a Labour government that says it wants to curtail big business and the worst aspects of big business could actually be, through its tax policy, the government that enhances the power of big business.
Many farmers get less than the minimum wage, and the return of death duties could be the final blow for these farming families.
If we had to pay an inheritance tax at the end, it would cripple it. It would. The money isn't there to do it. As I say, we're asset rich, cash poor, and if you take them assets away, you have no farm at the end of it.
Dougie Beattie, GB News, County Down.
superb, thought-provoking report by Doogie Beattie. I'm going to get him on in the next hour to talk it through, because if we have to sell off our farming land, who's going to buy it? Perhaps the state. What will they do with it? Perhaps build houses on it, solar farms? And then what happens to food sovereignty? We become more and more dependent on overseas importation. Have they thought this through, or is this designed just to hammer agricultural land and kill off our farming industry, already massively under attack? We'll have much more on that in the next hour. Love that story. Now, moving on, an inquiry has been ordered into the murder of solicitor Pat Finucane, and that's the Irish Premier Simon Harris said. The announcement of a public inquiry into the murder of that solicitor was part of a new approach by the UK government into legacy issues in Northern Ireland. Let's have a listen.
He was brutally murdered in his home in North Belfast by loyalist paramilitary group the Ulster Defence Association, in front of his wife Geraldine, who was wounded, and his 3 children, one of whom is now the Honourable Member for Belfast North. From that day onwards, Mrs Finucane and her family have campaigned tirelessly in search of answers about the killing of their loved one.
An important inquiry. Make sure we keep our eye on that one for you. Now, next. New report shows that training Ukrainian troops on British soil is draining a quarter of our capability to even train our own soldiers. It's time to have a rethink on the amount of money and time and resources we put into the Ukraine. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Club Classique, previously known as Méthode Club Classique, is South Africa's answer to the famous French fizz.
They basically have to be made in South Africa and also by the traditional method. So it's exactly the same method as champagne, but is made in a different place. So they can't call it champagne because it's not made in Champagne, but it's very similar.
And on the other hand, in Prosecco, it all happens in a sort of great vat.
Yes,
doesn't it?
Yes.
Which is why Prosecco tastes different from other sparkling wines.
Prosecco will taste much more fruity because you don't have the thing called lees aging. Insert the wine with brioche, biscuity, toasty flavours and aromas, which makes it much more complex.
Here we've got a thing called Journey's End.
Yes.
And would you like to tell us, I've said that people didn't want to splash out on champers. They might want to go the Cap Classique route.
Yes.
What would they be saving? How much might that cost in a shop?
So this one here will cost you about £17. So it is considerably, I guess, better value for money than champagne.
But I'd also comment that it's probably a good deal cheaper than English sparkling wine, which is interesting.
Yes, that is correct.
Now, this second one is called Kleiner Salzer.
It is, yes.
And you told me this is a little more expensive than the first one.
It is.
What price were we talking about here?
About 20.
About 20?
Yes.
Not vastly more.
No.
Are we going to taste £3 worth of improvement? Oh, and by the way, it went so beautifully with the cheese, just as you advised. Are South African sparkling wines, Cup Classique, are they pretty well available in English wine shops, British wine shops?
They are, yes. You can find them in all of the supermarkets. Growing-Beck, and that's on offer at the moment, actually. That's $11.99 from Waitrose, which is exceptional value.
That is insane.
Yes, it is. And you can also, so I bought with me today, so this is a Pinot Noir only, so that's a rosé sparkling.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:47. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, as the Ukrainian war approaches 3 years since it began, a major decision could be made with British missiles being used by Ukraine to strike Russia. Foreign Secretary David Lammy and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, well, they're currently in Ukraine to meet President Zelensky as restrictions on using long-range missiles are being lifted. But a new report says the UK has given an astonishing £7.8 billion to Ukraine since the start of the war. So is it time to stop providing so much aid and instead focus more on this country's needs? Well, joining us now to discuss this development is our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure to have you on. Charlie, the figures leap out of this report today are astonishing. £7.8 billion in support since January 2022. And of course, yesterday we saw £1.4 billion axed on the winter fuel allowance. And also, Charlie, tell us about this incredible statistic out of this new report here, saying that this is affecting our ability to train our own soldiers on British soil.
Well, good afternoon, Martin. I'm going to give you another statistic first because David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has just announced a further £600 million of aid for Ukraine as part of that visit with Antony Blinken to Kiev to meet with President Zelensky. Now, this will bring British funding further beyond that £8 billion mark. You just quoted the 7.8 from the NAO report. And this comes as Keir Starmer has also committed some £3 billion as required of military support at the start of his premiership. Now, in this announcement made just 20 minutes ago, the Defence Secretary John Healey said that our commitment to Ukraine is ironclad. But as you said, Martin, this could be coming at a cost to British defence capacity. It's obviously in Britain's strategic objectives to continue to support Ukraine. They see that ongoing conflict as vital to European and British national security. But this is potentially limiting our capacity to defend, train and equip our own troops. Something like an 8-fold increase in the number of exercises cancelled due to the training of Ukrainian forces. Now, Britain has trained more Ukrainians than any other NATO member. Some 42,000 troops trained under Operation Interflex since 2022. Previously, it was called Operation Orbital. It ran from 2015 when the invasion of Crimea kicked off. But it has had an impact on the availability of British forces to use their own exercise areas and training units. Operation Interforge, which was Royal Marine training of Ukrainian Marine forces, that was actually moved to the Netherlands last year because it was impacting the capacity of the Royal Marines, now quite a small and highly specialised force. It was affecting their capacity to carry out their future commando force training. Now, this comes as the British military, as you know, Martin, is in a difficult situation with manning and recruitment. Just under 74,000 troops in the regular army now, as it faces a recruitment crisis, the smallest the army's been since the Napoleonic era, but it has been delivering successfully this training to Ukrainian forces. The MOD sees it as one of the key military objectives and successes of recent years. They're teaching those Ukrainian forces in a 5-week rushed package, section battle drills, platoon attacks, vital field medicine, intelligence, signals, all the battlefield close combat skills that they'll required in the sort of fighting happening in the east of Europe. But as you say, Martin, a lot of concern about what this means for the British military. The NAO, the watchdog, saying that this was constraining the army's ability to train its own soldiers. Now, in reaction to this, the MOD has said today that all UK forces are getting the required training that they need. And they also thanked the NAO for this report, pointing towards the contribution that Britain has towards Ukraine.
It's astonishing, isn't it? You know, the day after they axed the winter fuel allowance to save £1.4 billion, Charlie Peters, they find an extra £600 million down the back of the sofa at Downing Street, now taking it to £8.4 billion to Ukraine since the war began. Charlie Peters, thank you very much for bringing us that superb breaking news. Excellent stuff as ever. Now, since the start of the show, hundreds of you have been getting in touch, particularly on the topic, of course, of the winter fuel allowance. Spoke to Catherine Plant, a carer for her father, Douglas, at the top of the show, and it's moved a great many of you to get in touch. I'll go through a couple of those now. Alison says this: I've just watched your interview regarding the fuel allowance, and it struck me. It is painfully clear that there are so many personal stories behind this awful bill that need to be told. Thank you, GB News, and thank you, Catherine and Douglas. No, thank you, Alison, for sharing that with us. Jeff also adds this: I'd like to see all pensioners descend on their local MP surgery to make the case to them and remind them that they do not work for Sir Keir Starmer and his whipped votes. They actually work for us, the constituency, the voters, the pensioners. So they should enjoy these 5 years ahead of them, because it might be their last 5 years as a Member of Parliament. Jeff, do you know what? I think that's a great idea. Why don't we see some OAPs, some old age protesters turning up at their local party office and say, do you know what? I can't afford to turn my heating on. Why don't I come inside your nice warm office? Why don't you make me a cup of tea? And you're absolutely right. They work for us, and it's about time perhaps that they remembered that. I've got a message here from somebody called Dame. This is Carol Vorderman. You remember, one of the biggest trumpets of getting the Conservatives out yesterday, astonishingly asking for Sir Keir Starmer to apologise for acting the winter fuel allowance. Dame says this: even far lefties like Carol Vorderman are calling for Sir Keir Starmer to reverse the axing of the pensioners' fuel allowance. You reap what you sow. Now, the Tory leadership race heats up as Mel Stride is eliminated. But who has the best chance to lead the Conservative Party? Can anybody save the party? Or, after their dismal turn at the general election, is the party over? They're down to the final four. We'll be joined by a Tory grandee to give his opinion on whether or not the Tory ship can be saved. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now it's time for your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, time for your weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Pretty cold out there this evening. Temperatures are going to fall further through the night. Yes, there will be a touch of frost, particularly in parts of the north in the countryside, thanks to the winds coming around this area of low pressure all the way down from the Arctic, hence why we do have the chill at the moment. There's a fair few showers still around this evening, but for many they'll tend to fade. We'll keep some going in northern Scotland, a few for the north of Northern Ireland, northern parts of Wales, northwest England, but elsewhere many areas dry and clear, and the wind's easing a touch overnight, which is why those temperatures will tumble down to 4 or 5 degrees in towns and cities, but rural spots, particularly in the northern half of the UK, likely to be close to or a little bit below freezing to start Thursday. So yes, a chill in the air tomorrow morning, and there will still be showers in the air as well coming in across northern Scotland. Still a fairly brisk wind, but not as lively, not as gusty as the winds have been through the day today. Those breezes will bring a few showers across the northern parts of Northern Ireland, plenty packing in across Wales, although the south coast probably dry, and a good part of England having a dry, fine and sunny start to Thursday, albeit with that chill in the air. Now, as we go through the day, we'll see the clouds bubbling up a little bit, but I don't think we'll see as many showers as we've seen through the course of today. It's still plenty for Wales and a few more coming into southwest England and across northern Scotland, but much of southern Scotland dry, and large parts of eastern England and the Midlands also staying dry and dodging the showers with some sunny spells. But despite a bit of sunshine, temperatures on the chilly side. Similar values to today, but at least the winds tomorrow will be a little lighter. Lighter still on Friday, and even again likely to see more of a frost on Friday morning. Much of the country though will be dry and fine on Friday. We will see rain coming into the northwest. The wind's picking up here as well. That's a sign of a change. Things turning wetter across the north into the weekend, staying dry in the south and slowly warming up.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Pontefract. Firstly, in West Yorkshire, where the southbound side of the A162 is blocked by the M62 at the Ferry Bridge services. There's queues forming at the scene there of a multi-vehicle accident. Abbey Hill in Derby, the southbound A38 closed from Little Eaton Island down towards Palm Court Island, so down towards the A6 Stuffield Road is queuing. That's due to a collision. Overrunning roadworks at the moment, northbound for the M42 Junction 6 up towards Coles Hill at 7. The lane shut, heavy back to Solihull at Junction 5. Emergency bridge repairs continue northbound M5 at the Taunton turn off Junction 25, slow going. The inside lane's combed off, and the Staines Road in Feltham in London is shut at the moment between Barrow Road and Hounslow Road, slow going for investigation work.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good luck.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, simple question. Are Labour the new nasty party? Yesterday, nearly 100% of Labour MPs who voted to axe the pensioners' winter fuel allowance. Today, GB News asked Rachel Reeves that precise question. Is Labour the new nasty party? You would not want to miss her answer. On today's show, I'll also be joined by another worried pensioner, a gentleman in his 80s, who share his fears about a looming winter of discontent. And next, with the Conservative leadership hopefuls down to the final four, can the Tories build back their shattered credibility? Or is the party over for the Conservatives? I'll be joined by Tory Grandee, Sir John Hayes, to weigh up the runners and the riders. And on last night's presidential TV debate over in America, Donald Trump made the extraordinary claim that illegal immigrants are eating pets, such as cats and dogs. Does this story have legs, or is it a barking mad conspiracy theory? And new figures show that the UK has given £7.8 billion to Ukraine since the start of the war. In fact, we heard in the last 20 minutes, David Lammy has just found an extra £600 million. And on top of that, a worrying new report shows that training Ukrainian troops on British soil is draining a quarter of our own capability to drill our own soldiers. Is it time to reconsider our actions? That's all coming up in your next hour. Well, it's the show. A pleasure to have your company. I've been blown away by your responses to Catherine Plant, who joined me at the top of the 3 o'clock, told the story about how the winter fuel allowance will impact her and her father, who's 84, who she had the primary carer for, in a cold home in Derbyshire. We're the People's Channel. We want to give the people a voice, and you can get involved in that conversation too by going to gbnews.com/your say. Now, it's your headlines, and here's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak's reignited the battle against Labour on its move to axe a winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners. Continuing his focus from last week's exchanges at Prime Minister's questions, the Conservative leaders pushed Sir Keir Starmer for details on the impact of the cuts.
We know why he's hiding the impact assessment. The Labour Party's own previous analysis claimed that this policy could cause 3,850 deaths. So are the numbers in his impact assessment higher
or lower than that.
However, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer pushed back, claiming his government was having to clear up the Conservatives' mess.
Because of the tough decisions that we're making to stabilise the economy, we can make sure that the triple lock shows that increases in pensions will outstrip any loss of payments. But before he complains about us clearing up his mess, perhaps he'd like to apologise for the £22 billion black hole.
Meanwhile, this morning, our political editor, Chris Hope, asked the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, if the looming October budget will be more bad news for pensioners.
We've committed to those bus passes, to free TV licences for those entitled, and free prescriptions. But we've also committed to the triple lock, not just for 1 year, but for the duration of this Parliament. And that means that pensions will continue to rise by whichever is higher, 2.5% inflation or average earnings. That means that pensioners have £900 more this winter and likely another £460 from next April.
In other news, the Foreign Secretary has announced over £600 million worth of support for Ukraine. David Lammy is currently in Ukraine with Antony Blinken, and they're calling it a critical moment in the war with Russia. Their joint visit follows reports that Joe Biden will lift a ban on British Storm Shadow missiles being used on Russian territory after Iran supplied ballistic missiles to Russia. Back in the UK, the Business Secretary has unveiled a multi-million-pound package to support Tata Steel's shift to greener production. Jonathan Reynolds blamed the previous government for failing to make critical decisions. However, the Conservatives are accusing Labour of extending a deal they once criticised. Jonathan Reynolds says the new agreement includes investment opportunities to secure long-term jobs, despite up to 2,800 positions being at risk.
Tata are agreeing to offer a comprehensive training programme for any employee as an alternative to those at risk of compulsory redundancy. This would be on full pay for 1 month and then £27,000 a year per employee for 11 months. And Tata will fund all of these costs. Employees will be able to choose from recognised qualifications to develop sought-after skills which will be in high demand in the local economy now and long into the future.
Now, no-fault evictions could soon be history as the government prepares to ban Section 21 evictions. The Renters' Rights Bill, set to be introduced today, promises sweeping changes to protect England's 11 million renters. It will also force private landlords to take faster action on unsafe housing conditions. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner says the bill will overhaul renting and tackle unfair practices. But landlords warn the reforms must be fair to both sides. And Donald Trump and Kamala Harris clashed on crime, immigration, abortion and the economy in their first and possibly only presidential debate. The showdown began with a handshake but quickly took a turn when Harris mocked Trump's rallies, accusing him of boring his crowds. Trump hit back, defending his popularity and attacking Harris on her immigration stance and economic policies.
She's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it?
And Harris blamed Trump for nationwide abortion restrictions and the Capitol riot while questioning his fitness for office.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Those are the latest headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, cracking hour ahead, let's get stuck in. And we've heard from the Prime Minister after a tense day yesterday in the House of Commons as MPs voted controversially to cut winter fuel payments for 10 million British pensioners. Conservatives and Reform are vowing to name and shame Labour Party MPs who voted, in their words, to freeze your grandparents as ministers doubled down on their decision to scrap winter fuel payments for those 10 million British pensioners. Well, joining me now in our studio is our political editor, Chris Hope. So, Chris Hope, we've carried the results of that astonishing vote on this show live yesterday. It became rapidly and abundantly clear that this was a party vote. 348 MPs voted to scrap the winter fuel allowance. All of them, 348, were the Labour Party. Could this be the moment, their poll tax moment, their Maggie Thatcher milk snatcher moment? Is this £1.4 billion saving simply going to haunt them? Are they the new nasty party?
Well, that's a question that can be asked, of course. Now, the idea of a nasty party throws back to Theresa May in 2001. She gave a speech to Tory members after that catastrophic defeat in 2001 after the 1997 Labour election landslide. And she said, the problem is we are the nasty party. How can we fix that? And that gave birth to David Cameron. The new idea of a nasty party is because you have all these MPs who have voted to remove £300 every year from 10 million people who might vote for you. That is a problem, and we're going to see, I think, any of these people who are feeling bad about this will look at the other choices made by this government, the spending, and wonder why that's happening. Now, the war in Ukraine is the most sympathetic way to spend money in government at the moment, but as we speak, David Lammy has announced £600 million for Ukraine, taking their total, I think, Martin, to 8.4 billion we as a country have given them since January 2022. No one is saying that's money not well spent, but there are choices being made by the government to spend money in Ukraine and not on pensions. But the idea of a nasty party is a question that I asked on your behalf of the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, at dawn this morning in Silverstone. Here's what you had to say. We'll come to the economy in a minute, but just about the vote yesterday in House of Commons on the winter fuel allowance. The fact is that 348 Labour MPs voted to make pensioners colder this winter. Is Labour now the nasty party?
Well, this government faced a £22 billion black hole in the public finances, but we were determined to protect the poorest pensioners, which is why pension credit and the winter fuel payment will continue to be paid to those pensioners who most need the support. But in addition to that, we committed to the triple lock in our manifesto, not just for 1 year, but for the duration of this Parliament. And the triple lock means that this winter, the new state pension is worth £900 more than it was a year ago.
That's Rachel Reeves talking to me earlier in Silverstone. A big issue there, I think. And again, what's going to happen? People will look at the choices being made by this government, choices being made which you don't have to do. 1.5 billion being saved in years 2, 3, 4 onwards. But look at the money that could be saved by not doing that.
And this story won't go away. We're going to make sure, damn sure as mustard, this story doesn't go away. He spoke to Catherine Plant, a carer for her father, Douglas, earlier in the show. We're speaking to another pensioner in his 80s in the next hour. But some astonishing analysis of who voted the Labour Party by GB News overnight. Chris Hope, 70 new Labour seats, swing seats that were previously Conservative or SNP. 90% of the pensioners living in those constituencies with a fresh Labour MP are set to lose their winter fuel allowance. And Chris, when you delve into it, they are often in more impoverished areas in the southwest, down in Cornwall there, in Northumberland and Scotland, where we know it gets a lot colder. These are decisions that are going to have very, very real impacts on a lot of people. And I wonder if these MPs know what they're doing here.
Well, that's right. They're swing seats where you've got a reformer biting at the heels of those new Labour MPs, and that's why I think it's a real worry here about what have they done here, and this will not be forgotten. I look back in history maybe to the early 2010s when the Lib Dems went through and voted for a Tory policy to increase tuition fees. Lib Dems were never forgiven for that. Right. And it took 2 or 3 elections to wipe that slate clean. But even now, anecdotally, it's talked about the 75p increase by Gordon Brown on the state pension. That was a massive own goal, which it took a while to get over in the mid 2000s by the Labour government. So there's a choice here being made by Rachel Reeves, which has surprised many because there's so many other ways to save that money. 1.5 billion. And in fact, I asked her in the meeting earlier with Rachel Reeves, it is the case, isn't it, that if all 800,000 people who haven't signed up for the pension credit do so. Would that wipe out the 1.5 billion that you'd saved? And she didn't really answer the question, but she said that she wants to make sure that those who receive the benefit are in need of it, basically accepting it.
But the answer is yes.
The answer was yes, without saying it.
If all of those pensioners apply, I think we did this on yesterday's show, it'd be something like £3.1 billion. So it will totally eradicate any saving. But is this about the money? And, you know, that 600 million mentioned there about David Lammy suddenly fishing out the back of the sofa at Downing Street, given to President Zelensky. I think, Chris, every single piece of expenditure now is going to go through the scrutiny of, well, that could have gone on the winter fuel allowance.
I don't think, I'm not saying it, you're not saying that the money shouldn't go to Ukraine. The point is it will be scrutinised because you've got choices being made here. You've got the research done by the Labour Party back in 2017 when this last reared its head seriously, that 4,000 pensioners would die from the removal of this benefit. You know, that's a choice being made by this government. And if I did ask the Chancellor, are you not putting the economy ahead of pensioners' lives? Again, she didn't want to answer these questions. They're difficult questions to answer because they go to the heart of a choice made by the Labour government.
And Chris, there's another question you asked. We'll pull this clip for the next hour, but specifically, we know that members of Parliament, including Rachel Reeves, they get their homes, their second homes, heated for free, paid for by taxpayers.
Yeah, the numbers in today's Telegraph, it's worth looking at that. Of course, as an MP, you do have a second home. She is an MP from up north, so she has a second home in London, which we pay to heat because we have to pay the bills to maintain the home that she wouldn't require if she weren't an MP. But the bill for hers, I think, is nearly £4,000 over 5 years. Someone said on Twitter, is she heating a goldfish pond? I mean, why do you need all that money? I guess it's about £1,000 a year, so maybe it's about right. But the point is, you've got MPs voting to remove this benefit from pensioners who are getting state support for their own heating bills, and that's what I think is hard to stomach for many people.
And I think it's just that feeling of one rule for them, one rule for us, and that's what really sticks in people's craw. And I think, well, I know for sure, David Pinless, he runs the founder of the Pensioner Vote, he's did that list of shame for us, every MP in the land.
That started already. You've got Tory candidates who have just lost 2 months ago, narrowly in some cases, to Labour MPs. They are now saying 19,000 pensioners in your seat will now be cold this winter, or risk being cold this winter because of the way that your MP voted. And this is the first line, I think, as I said last night to you, Martin, on all of those election leaflets and addresses being prepared by these candidates at the next election in 4 years' time.
If only we had an effective opposition. And on that point, let's talk about the fact we now know, yesterday again broke on this show at 5 p.m. Again, you were grabbing Conservatives
do my best
as we went through Westminster Hall. But now we know we're down to the final four. Tell us more.
Yes, of course, Robert Jenrick came top. I mean, essentially all of the votes from Priti Patel were shared out equally. Jenrick was up 5 to 33 MPs backed him on the Tory side. Kemi Badenoch +6 to 28. And Tom Tugendhat surged to 21 MPs. James Cleverly-Beckham on 21. Those four names now go forward to the Tory party conference. There'll be a series of hustings, the final two chosen after that, and then they'll be put forward to the membership. And hopefully we can help with GB News viewers getting questions into them then and try and hold them to account. And the result announced on November the 2nd. But it looks like momentum is certainly with those three, not with James Cleverly, although I think James Cleverly has always been my dark horse for this. He's someone who I think the membership relate to.
Yeah, and I think out of the, you might call them the centrist two, the Cleverly and the Tugendhat, would your money be on Cleverly to make the grade there? And so then we know Mel Strider's gone. That leaves Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch, beg your pardon, from, I guess you would call it the political right. Would you expect one of the centrists to go against one from the right, and that's your final two?
That should be the choice. MPs are meant to be choosing, giving members a choice to choose one, and members being the grassroots. So it'd be a shame if it was both in the same wing of the party. They want a choice, I think, the base. The base are thought to be pretty right-wing. They chose, didn't they, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss in the previous two times this happened.
Do you think, looking back, obviously hindsight's a great thing. Nobody's got a crystal ball, but we've all got a rear-view mirror. Do you think they've made a mistake by leaving it so long? I mean, so much has happened. Normally they call it a silly season. There's a time to reflect. This year we had the riots, we had the Southport killings. There hasn't been a quiet day in politics since the general election. The Conservative Party seems to have been pretty absent from the battlefield the entire time. Do you think they'll look back and kick themselves they didn't get this job done quicker?
I think they won't. I'll tell you why. The scale of the Labour's majority, 170 or so MPs, means there's no jeopardy surrounding this government for 5 years, 4 or 5 years. There's no election until 2028, 2029. Back in the 70s, when Margaret Thatcher became leader in about 75 or 6, I think it was, there was very real risk the Labour government could collapse. We've had this Tory government teetering on the edge of collapse over recent years. I think there is no way it's going to happen, so they may as well spend some time working out who's the best leader for them.
OK, well, stick around, because after the break, we've got Sir John Hayes, Tory grandee. We're going to put this to him. Is there any hope in saving the Tory party, or is the party over? So time for the Great British Giveaway now, and the biggest cash prize that we've ever given away. 36 grand could be yours in cold, hard cash, tax-free. And that's like having an extra 3 grand in your bank account every single month for a whole year. Now, here's all the details that you need to trouser it. Well, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris went head-to-head last night, but who came out on top? And astonishingly, Donald Trump said that immigrants are eating pets. But next, I'll be joined by Sir John Hayes. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
My next guest is a composer and film director whose musical journey began at the tender age of 4.5 when he started playing the piano. Under the tutelage of luminaries such as Sir George Benjamin and Sir Harrison Birtwistle, he has honed his craft, primarily grounding himself in the classical world. He's written music in sets of composition in the 24 major and minor keys of the chromatic scale, producing an album which is accompanied by 24 videos, and it's called 24. I'm joined now by Fabio D'Andrea. Fabio, great to see you. Tell me a little bit, I'm a layman when it comes to music, tell me a little bit about how a composer chooses a key and what it means to the composer to have chosen the key.
Sure. Well, I think every musical key, and there's 24 of them, major and minor, they have their own feel. So you could play a piece in, say, C major, which is normally regarded as the simple key, it's all the white notes on the piano. But if you play that piece, say, in A flat major, it's going to have a very different feel. So I decided to create this project, 24 pieces, again, looking back at our traditions and the history of what composers have done in the past, especially in regards to piano music, and explore every key, see if I could bring out the emotion that you feel from that actual key itself.
Were you fonder of some than others? I imagine, for example, you're not so fond of C because it's too straightforward.
Actually, no, I love all of them. And that's the beauty of music. Every key has its own feel. And some keys are associated with different feelings. So, for example, C major has actually been historically associated with victory. It's quite a victorious feel about it. I love D flat major. That's quite mellow. But every key has its own special feeling. And sometimes something will just sound different in that one key, and it's meant to be in that key. So for me, this has been a whole exploration of that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:23. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, getting back to that Tory leadership race, Robert Jenrick is leading the pack. Well, joining me now is the Conservative MP, Sir John Hayes. Sir John, welcome to the studio. So I'm assuming you are Team Robert Jenrick. Your man at the moment is out in front. Tell us why you think he should bag the top job.
I guess three things above all others. First, he's got the intellect, the intelligence to deliver a narrative, to devise and deliver a narrative. Secondly, that he's shown appropriate levels of principle and courage. You'll remember that he stepped down from the Sunak government because he felt that they need to be tougher on migration and brought a number of amendments to the House accordingly. And thirdly, because I think we can market Robert. I think he's the kind of politician that the public will accept should be leading the country. He has the background, he has the experience. He represents Newark, not too far from where I do, which is a small town in Nottinghamshire, brought up in Wolverhampton, working class parents in the northwest of London. You know, he has the kind of character and approach which I think we can persuade the British public will be beneficial for both my party and for the country.
Well, Sir John, that's my father's Member of Parliament. So, Bob, my dad, are you listening? Was that a good pick? Sir John, I'm also joined in the studio here by Chris Hope, our political editor. He's got a question for you.
John, great to see you on GB News. You said there that he's a type of politician people think should be made a leader. Is that part of the problem with Robert Jenrick? He's a bit of an identikit classic Tory. And if you look at who he's up against, Kemi Baden and James Cleverly, both from ethnic minority backgrounds, that would let someone stand out, be different and challenge Labour in a way which Robert Jenrick it couldn't.
It wouldn't be different from Rishi Sunak, would it? It's not as if the Conservative Party's ever been timid about choosing people regardless of their origins or background. And so I don't think it's about, ticking a box. I don't think it's about whether you're from an ethnic minority background or you're male or female, but whether you have the core qualities necessary to lead. And I talked about insight and intelligence, I talked about principle, and I talked about being connected, having the sort of experience
on that point,
on
that point, you just say core principle, of course. He was a Remainer, and you're proposing to pitch him in against someone else amongst a base which is very Eurosceptic. The selectorate choosing this, the 130,000 Tory MPs, are broadly Brexity, and he wasn't, was he, back in 2016?
Well, as you know, I was a very staunch Brexiteer myself. If you look at the people backing Robert Jenrick, people like myself and Edward Lee, Caroline Johnson, all from Nottinghamshire, and then people from other parts of the country that are supporting Robert, leading Brexiteers. And Bill Cash, I know, is a great admirer and supporter of Robert Jenrick. No one could second-guess Bill Cash when it comes to Brexit. So I actually think Robert's attracting support from Brexiteers, and I just cite his determination to take back control from the European Court. He's the only candidate in selection who said that he believes now we should free ourselves from the ECHR, which, as you know, has stymied government's attempts because of the power of that foreign court to deal, for example, with the issue of immigration. So there's courage there. There's principle there, and I think he's got the right message and a determination to deliver it.
So, John, isn't there a bigger threat to Robert Jenrick, in fact, the entire Conservative Party, and that's the bigger Brexiteer, you might say the top Brexiteer, and that's Nigel Farage. The Reform Party seem to have stolen a lot of the clothes, a lot of the thunder of the Conservative Party, certainly stole 4 million votes. And I wonder if a lot of people are thinking, does it matter who the Conservative Party leader is? A huge amount of trust was lost, a huge amount of votes were lost. Is it a case of, is this rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? Does it not matter who's the leader because the party seems to be sinking?
Well, the leadership matters, but the message matters more. And you have to have a leader that, as I described earlier, has got the capability of devising and delivering a message to those very voters. Now, I take the view that that's about an affirmation of what I would describe as authentic Toryism, Conservative values. People who vote Conservative expect to get a Conservative government. That's not unreasonable, is it? And I just don't think they felt we were Conservative enough. So it's not about tacking to the centre or pandering to the liberal left agenda. It's about being proud about conservatism, which is both around the national interest. I talked about Europe and the ECHR, but also about the common good. about a party that recognises that the things we share have got to be greater than the things that divide us. The fortunate have a responsibility for the less fortunate. This is a holistic communitarian Toryism, which is both, as I say, an affirmation of the authenticity of our message, but making sure that message is transmitted in a way that's attractive to those voters we lost last time. It's also, that competence. John, just the reform basis.
If I may,
a leader that's competent.
Yes, I get it. John, just very finally, before we run out of time, do you think this is going on for too long? Martin Daubney in your studio here has been questioning it. I was, of course, with you for Robert Jenrick's leadership launch in Newark, I think, at the beginning of last month. It runs until November the 2nd. Do you think you're giving Labour a free run to, well, frankly, take money away from pensioners at the moment?
Well, I think you would have been impressed by that leadership launch in Newark, Chris. I mean, it's for you to say so, but I certainly was. And it's important it's thorough. So you're right that the challenge that brings is that Labour are doing also things that we have been challenging them, indeed, in the House on that issue of pensioners. We voted this week against the Labour attempt to steal money from our pensioners. So that's an ongoing battle, but it has to be thorough. And the members of the party deserve their say. So it's not just about what MPs think, although that matters too. The members deserve their chance to assess all of these candidates in the round. So whilst that is time-consuming, I think the thoroughness is what matters most.
Okay.
Okay, it's John Hayes. Thank you very much. And the party members go to a ballot which closes on October 31st. Happy Halloween. And, of course, a new leader then, November the 2nd. So, John, thank you very much. And also Chris Hope in the studio, as ever. Thank you both very much, gentlemen. Now, lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. And following a new trial, weight loss jabs could be given to obese kids as young as 6. Is that really a good idea? Fat jabs for fat kids. See you in 3. But first, here's your headlines with Sophia Wenslow.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 4:30. These are your headlines. The government has announced a public inquiry into the 1989 murder of Belfast solicitor Pat Finucane. He was killed in his home, and investigations found the attack involved collusion with the state. The 39-year-old's family, who've campaigned for decades, welcomed the move, with his son John posting on social media, "Today is for my father." But DUP leader Gavin Robinson criticised the inquiry, claiming it perpetuates a hierarchy of victims in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Labour is facing mounting pressure from within its own ranks to reverse cuts to the winter fuel payment. In today's exchanges at Prime Minister's questions, Rishi Sunak pushed Sir Keir Starmer for details on the impact of the cuts, which will see 10 million pensioners lose the payment. Despite the opposition, the Prime Minister insists it's necessary to fix a £22 billion financial shortfall. Meanwhile, this morning, our political editor, Chris Hope, asked the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, if the looming October budget will be more bad news for pensioners.
We've committed to those bus passes, to free TV licences for those entitled, and free prescriptions. But we've also committed to the triple lock, not just for 1 year, but for the duration of this Parliament. And that means that pensions will continue to rise by whichever is higher, 2.5% inflation or average earnings. That means that pensioners have £900 more this winter and likely another £460 from next April.
Now, in other news, Foreign Secretary David Lammy said the West is listening carefully to Ukraine's needs amid calls to allow Kyiv to use long-range missiles in Russia. David Lammy and the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken are in Ukraine on a joint trip, calling it a critical moment in the war with Russia. Mr. Lammy announced over £600 million worth of support for Ukraine, including aid to meet immediate humanitarian, energy and stabilisation needs. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophie. Got to say, the GB News inbox is going off the rails about the £600 million that David Lammy, in the words of George, has just magicked up. to give to Ukraine, while the day after, of course, axing the winter fuel allowance. Get your views across the usual way. GBNews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Pretty chilly out there today, and it's only going to get colder overnight as the showers fade and many of us have clear spells. Still some pretty heavy showers around at the moment, though, particularly over the West Midlands, northwest England and Wales. You'll rumble of thunder, even a bit of hail, and there's some snow over the tops of the mountains across Scotland in the showers. But they are fading in much of southern Scotland, eastern England, southern England. Here we'll by and large have a dry night with those lengthy clear spells and temperatures dropping 4 or 5 degrees. That's in towns and cities. Many rural spots not far off freezing. And across northern Britain there will be a frost for many in the countryside. So yes, a pretty cold start to Thursday, but a sunshine will soon start to lift those temperatures. By and large, a fine start across East Anglia and the southeast. There will again be plenty of showers packing in across north and west Wales and parts of northwest England. A few for the north and the east of Northern Ireland. Grazing the west coast of Scotland, there'll be a few showers, but the central belt generally dry. Much of the east coast dry. Showers still coming in on a fairly brisk northerly wind, but those winds won't be as strong. It won't feel quite as cold during tomorrow. There'll be a few more showers tomorrow compared to today across southwest England, but they'll be pretty well scattered here and across Wales, and certainly for a good part of central and eastern England. Many places will be dry. By and large, a dry day in southern Scotland as well. But it won't be warm, even with a bit of sunshine. Temperatures struggling to get to 15, 16 degrees. The winds, though, will be lighter than today, as I mentioned, so it'll probably feel a little less cold tomorrow. But tomorrow night, again, as the showers fade and the sky is clear, we are going to see those temperatures tumbling. Even more of a frost likely on Friday morning. High pressure, though, is moving in across the south. That'll bring a lot of fine weather through Friday and the weekend. These weather fronts will bring some wetter weather and windy weather across the north and west into the weekend. But it will also, by then, start to warm up.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Pontefract in West Yorkshire seeing queues on the southbound side of the M162. It's blocked by the Ferry Bridge services, so that's the M62. Queuing for multi-vehicle collision there. Now, the overrunning roadworks, well, they're still overrunning northbound on the M42, a lane shut. Birmingham Airport at 6, up towards Coleshill at 7. The queue now snaking back to Shirley and Dorridge at Junction 4 northbound. Northbound M5 at the turn off at Taunton Junction 25. Now, lane 1 and 3 remains combed off for emergency bridge repairs. That is slow going. Clockwise M25. Now the exit slip to come off at St Albans Junction 21A. Part blocked and slow. There's a bump there on towards the North Orbital Road. And the Staines Road in Feltham in London is shut between Hounslow Road and Barrack Road in queuing. It's due to accident investigation work. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:36 and I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, during last night's presidential TV debate, Donald Trump claimed that Haitian immigrants in Ohio are stealing pets and eating them. Let's have a little listen.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Well, Kamala Harris was laughing. The rest of us were just going, what's going on here? And afterwards, ABC News' moderator David Muir, well, he corrected the former president and stated that there is no evidence for Donald Trump's outlandish claim. Well, to delve further into this cat and dog story is the former advisor to the Clinton and the Bush administrations, Steve Gill. Steve, this is the conversation I never thought I'd be having with anybody, let alone you, an esteemed expert of many, many years experience, but this is Donald Trump. So it's an extraordinary comment. My basic question is there any truth in this happening, or is it actually just a barking mad conspiracy theory?
It's raining cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. First of all, the background, Springfield is a town of about 40,000 people. The Biden-Harris administration has literally transported 20,000 Haitians into that community who have no cultural connection, geographic connection, no connection whatsoever. And they have changed, obviously, very recently, the culture The city and the state like it because they're getting federal money to house and take care of these people. But despite what the counter argument to Trump pointing this out, there are police recordings, 911 calls evidencing that this happened. People have gone to city council over the last month and complained about this happening. There are videotapes of these Haitians with machetes cutting off pigs' heads, taking geese out of the local pond to kill them and eat them. There is actual evidence, and we're going to get a lot more, because I think we saw the evidence out in Aurora, Colorado a few weeks ago, where you had Venezuelan armed gang members taking over apartment buildings. The city officials first denied it. The governor, Democrat, denied it. And now they're admitting it, and they're trying to do something about it. I think you're going to see more and more evidence in the next 48 hours that Trump was right, and the moderators that Kamala had to bring along with her to help her through the debate are absolutely wrong.
And Steve, one of the points then that Donald Trump went on to make was that if Kamala Harris is elected as the president, he says that America will turn into Venezuela on steroids. And of course, one of his strengths is keeping this conversation about that very porous southern border. What's the true number, do you think, Steve, of illegal immigrants that may have poured into America on the Biden watch?
Well, they're talking about 18 to 20 million that they know of. But again, you've got the, quote, gotaways that far exceed that number. This is a potent issue. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people who say that Kamala Harris won the debate last night are ignoring the polls showing that he has surged even more today in polls on who people trust on the economy, surged on the immigration issue. And just as we've seen in Europe, whether it's in Britain, whether it's in France, Italy, across the board, Germany, illegal immigration is an issue that we have seen play out in elections in Europe. We're going to see it play out here in the U.S. as well, because Kamala Harris doesn't have an answer for the millions of people that have clogged our schools, our healthcare systems, taken jobs away, hurt the economy. And whether they're eating dogs or cats or both, I think people understand that the illegal immigration issue is having a huge impact on our communities all across the United States.
Steve Gill, only in America. What a story, and thank you for bringing some common sense to it. And there'll be lots more of this craziness, I'm sure, as we approach November the 5th, of course, in Britain.
Thinking, thank God we revolted and left you guys 250 years ago. Thank God they're gone.
Steve Gill, it's always an absolute delight to have you on the show. Martin. You take care, my friend. Speak again soon.
Thank you, my friend.
Now, a return to royal duties in the UK is not on the horizon for Prince Harry, instead choosing to focus on projects in California. And the claim forms part of a new report where the Duke of Sussex speaks to People magazine ahead of his 40th birthday on Sunday. And our royal correspondent Cameron Walker is here with more on this astonishing developing story. Cameron, so it seems then that the ginger prince would not be returning.
Yeah, an unexpected development really here, Martin, in the last hour or so. Prince Harry has not given an interview to People magazine, but he's given them an email, and that's a quote I can say from the article. Prince Harry tells them, "The best gift I've ever been given is without doubt my kids. I enjoy watching them grow every single day, and I love being their dad." It also reports, that article, that Prince Harry plans to spend his 40th birthday on Sunday with his wife and children. Meghan reportedly throwing a big party for him at their California mansion, and then Prince Harry is going to jet off away from the United States with the lads, with his a group of close friends, as it's being quoted in that article, for a bit of a holiday. Let's see if it's a repeat of his infamous Las Vegas trip from a decade or so ago. But the key line in this for me is the fact that it says a return to royal duties is not on the horizon for Prince Harry. Now, that is not a direct quote from Prince Harry himself in the article, but presumably because it's written in the same article that Harry has sent an email to contribute to this particular article, it has been approved by Prince Harry and his team, which suggests to me that it is in fact true. Prince Harry has no plans to return to the UK to support his father or indeed his brother as a working member of the royal family. It says he's happy in California with his wife and raising his 2 young children, and with his projects, of course, in the United States. He's got his Polo Netflix documentary coming out soon. That started to be promoted this week. And later this month, he's in New York celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Diana Award, which is a legacy award set up 25 years ago, which champions young people in memory of his mother, Princess Diana. Prince William also supports that charity, but of course, they're supporting it separately on both sides of the Atlantic.
Cameron Walker, a significant change of position to even last week when we were hearing that Prince Harry would consider a return if William apologised and even if the King apologised. Those apologies haven't been forthcoming to our knowledge. Do you think that may be an influence? It just looks like there's no happy return for him, so therefore he's not going to bother.
Yeah, well, I think it's very significant, actually, that there's no suggestion from anyone close to the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, that that is true, because clearly they are saying, no, he's not coming back to the UK, he's not even considering it, and that quote about only if Prince William apologises has not been confirmed at all by the Duke of Sussex. You ask those close to Prince William the same thing, and of course it's no comment. I think anything to do with Prince Harry, when you ask the press office or somebody close to the King or Prince William, is no comments when it comes to Prince Harry. So clearly there is still a big rift there across the Atlantic.
And Cameron Walker, of course, as you and I spoke earlier this week, that astonishing video from Princess Catherine with Prince William in that. Perhaps they have more important things to focus on. Excellent story. Thank you, Cameron Walker, for joining us and giving us that breaking news. Prince Harry has no plans for a royal return to Britain anytime soon. Thank you very much for bringing us up to speed. Now, moving on, following a new trial, weight loss jabs could be given to obese children as young as 6. Is that the right thing to do? Fat jabs for fat kids. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark Meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
And feelings of stress and anxiety tend to be quite normal for a lot of kids. And if it's normal for the kids, then it affects the parents as well.
Well, it seems that our canine friends could be the cure after new research by the University of Bristol found that dogs are incredibly sensitive to their owners' emotions.
OK, how do we cheat into this? How can your doggy help your family handle stress during this time of the year? Let's go to the Director of Canine Affairs at Guide Dogs UK, Tim Stafford. Tim, we're talking about this as if it's a big revelation, but obviously, you know, a man like yourself, you're well used to this, and you can see when a dog is reacting. What form would that reaction take, do you think?
Yeah, you know what? It's nice when the science kind of confirms what most of us have known for a very long time. Our dogs become members of our family and they come very, very close to us. So it's no surprise that anything that goes on in the family is going to be detected and picked up by the dog. That can be changes in behaviours. It can certainly be the dogs watching our behaviours and starting to mirror those behaviours. But what this research says is that the dogs can actually smell our emotions. It's not just that they're responding to our behaviour changes, they're responding to our physiological changes as well, because we smell differently when we start to get anxious. So at this time, there's lots of changes in a lot of families' lives. Kids are going back to school, young people are going to university, parents are having to deal with all of the emotions attached to that. So it's no surprise that our dogs start to detect that too.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:48. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, here's one to get your teeth into. The weight loss jab trend continues to grow in popularity, with prospects now pointing towards offering them to obese children as young as, wait for it, six-year-olds. A US study trial recruiting 82 obese youngsters found that the jabs did help cut their body mass index. And the study leader, Professor Claudia Fox from the University of Minnesota Medical School, said, to date, children have had virtually no options for treating obesity. Well, could try not eating. Anyway, they have been told to try harder with diet and exercise, and now, with the possibility of a medication that addresses the underlying physiology of obesity, there is hope that children living with obesity can live healthier and more productive lives. Well, I can hear my next guest already foaming at the mouth. And it's the former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller. Steve, I know your take on fat jabs. You think there are shortcuts, we should be trying harder, but seriously, giving them to kids as young as 6, have we gone mad?
Well, the first thing on my mind when I heard about this is, what has this country come to when we're talking about getting kids as young as 6 years old to be jabbed weekly or however often it is, because they are too fat? Where are the parents in all of this? There's 3 things actually here that are important. Number one is we do not know the long-term consequences of these jabs. So if I had a child and I was going to let them have the jab, I would be feeling like I'm treating them like a lab rat, to be quite honest with you, because we don't know the long-term consequences. Secondly, the manufacturers are clear that some of the potential side effects can be very serious. We're talking about potentially pancreatitis, let's get my word out, and also it lists as a potential side effect thyroid cancer. So are we, is it arguably it's called the gamble jab, to be honest with you, because of these potential side effects at the moment. And then thirdly, I come back to the parents. Where are the parents in all of this? Because they are the role models. So it really is about parenting, and it's about parenting from being a role model yourself in terms of being slim and healthy, and not expecting a jab to take your place and other people to take your place. If you have children, they are your responsibility. Think before you breed.
It's absolutely a fair point. Nevertheless, Steve, looking at the study itself, over a year, the body mass index of these fat kids was down by 7%. It also lowered their blood pressure and it lowered their blood sugar levels. And we know that that can reduce things like the longer-term risk of diabetes, against a placebo where the kids were putting on weight, suggesting to me they thought the jab was working and they were chowing down on extra pizza and whatnot to make up for it. 20% of British kids are overweight by the age of 5 when they start school. We've got an obesity crisis. It starts young. Perhaps, Steve Miller, desperate situations call for desperate measures, and fat jabs for fat kids has some merit.
Yeah, desperate measures means we're much more blunt in this country about obesity and fat. The other thing you need to remember with this is when you stop taking that jab, it is highly likely that you're going to put all the weight back on. Now, the thought of a child of 6 years of age, starting with that jab, conditioning them mentally to live with that jab, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely not on. And I say to all parents to think really, really careful about this. We don't know what's going to happen long term. We don't know the consequences. So, I put out there the plea to parents to be that role model and engage with their kids and teach them how to cook and have fun with them, in the park, running around and whatever.
I think, Steve Miller, you've raised an excellent point there, and that is if you get kids hooked on the idea of quick fixes work at an early age, you're going to set a template for life.
Oh, completely. Of course you are. You're actually putting the message out there that this is the way you stay healthy. This is the way you stay slim. And my concern is that these kids will become dependent on the jab, on this particular jab. That's my big concern. And as well as that, is some of these potential side effects that the manufacturer lists. And I say to anyone considering these jabs to look very, very closely at those potential side effects and also talk to people that have tried these jabs, some with a lot of success. I hold my hands up and say yes. But trust me, quite a number with a dire experience as well.
OK, Steve Miller, it's always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. The voice of common sense. Thank you very much, as ever. Now, before we end this hour, got a few of your says coming through, and it's fair to say you're getting pretty hot under the collar about the notion that yesterday £1.4 billion was saved on the winter fuel allowance, and today David Lammy has suddenly found £600 million to give to Ukraine, now taking the UK's total to £8.4 billion since 2022 January, when the conflict started. George says this: David Lammy can magic up £600 million from nowhere to spend abroad, but they refuse to keep their own people warm in Britain. James has this: Hi Martin, I'd just like you to know that my husband has a private pension and basic state pension. I have a small state pension, but we still struggle as our housing association one-bedroom flat, along with our council tax, comes to almost £900. Our energy bills have more than tripled, and our food, as you know, prices are crazy. They don't live in the real world. I totally hear what you say there, James, and thanks for your comments. We'll be continuing that conversation after the break. We're speaking to another pensioner in his 80s who's very, very perilously afraid of the winter ahead, thanks to that autumn cut. Now, we're a Britain's News Channel. I'm Martin Daubney. Here's your weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Pretty chilly out there today, and it's only going to get colder overnight as the showers fade and many of us have clear spells. Still some pretty heavy showers around at the moment, though, particularly over the West Midlands, northwest England and Wales. A rumble of thunder, even a bit of hail, and there's some snow over the tops of the mountains across Scotland in the showers. But they are fading in much of southern Scotland, eastern England, southern England. Here we'll by and large have a dry night with those lengthy clear spells and temperatures dropping 4 or 5 degrees. That's in towns and cities, many rural spots not far off freezing. And across northern Britain there will be a frost for many in the countryside. So yes, a pretty cold start to Thursday, but a sunshine will soon start to lift those temperatures. By and large, a fine start across East Anglia and the southeast. There will again be plenty of showers packing in across north and west Wales and parts of northwest England. A few for the north and the east of Northern Ireland. Grazing the west coast of Scotland, there'll be a few showers, but the central belt generally dry. Much of the east coast dry. Showers still coming in on a fairly brisk northerly wind, but those winds won't be as strong. It won't feel quite as cold during tomorrow. There'll be a few more showers tomorrow compared to today across southwest England, but they'll be pretty well scattered here and across Wales, and certainly for a good part of central and eastern England. Many places will be dry. By and large, a dry day in southern Scotland as well. But it won't be warm, even with a bit of sunshine. Temperatures struggling to get to 15, 16 degrees. The winds, though, will be lighter than today, as I mentioned, so it'll probably feel a little less cold tomorrow. But tomorrow night, again, as the showers fade and the sky is clear, we are going to see those temperatures tumbling. Even more of a frost likely on Friday morning. High pressure, though, is moving in across the south. That'll bring a lot of fine weather through Friday and the weekend. These weather fronts will bring some wetter weather and windy weather across the north and west into the weekend. But it will also, by then, start to warm up.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's overrunning roadworks causing queues on the northbound M42. A lane shut junction 6 at Coventry up to Coleshill at 7. The queue sneaking back to Shirley and Dorridge at junction 4. Northbound M5 in Somerset at the Taunton turnoff. Junction 25, there's emergency bridge repairs continuing. Slow going past the scene, a lane closure in place. Now at Hertfordshire, the northbound A1M is shut at junction 6. That's the Welling turnoff and queuing. That's due to a collision. There's one heading toward London, that's part blocking the M2 around the turn off for junction 5 Sittingbourne. It's causing queues on the approaches, and a collision too in Hampshire on the northbound side of the M3. A lane shut and delays building up towards the Basingstoke turn off there. That's junction 6 this afternoon as well. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's an incredible and good luck.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, the big question is, are Labour the new nasty party? Yesterday, nearly 100% of Labour MPs who voted to axe the pensioners' winter fuel allowance, 348 out of 348, they were all Labour. And today, GB News asked Rachel Reeves, is Labour the new nasty party? On today's show, shortly, I'll be interviewing a worried pensioner in his 80s to find out what it means for him, his worries about a looming winter of discontent. Next up, new figures show that the UK has now given an astonishing $8.4 billion to Ukraine since the start of the war, because David Lammy, a short while ago, has found a further $600 million for the Ukraine the day after axing $1.4 billion from pensioners. Have we gone too far? And apparently scientists have finally found the cure for a hangover. Well, researchers claim that a new drink called the safety shot can reverse the horrors of a hangover in just 30 minutes. That sounds too good to be true, and I'll be the judge of that. That's all coming up in your next hour. Well, it's a pleasure to have your company. We're the People's Channel, and earlier in the show we spoke to a carer for a pensioner, her father, Catherine Plant, her father in his 80s. She's gravely concerned about what it means about being in this winter time with that winter fuel allowance gone. Shortly, I'll be joined by another pensioner in his 80s to find out his concerns. Let me know your feelings on this huge story. Get involved in the conversation, please. gbnews.com/you're saying. What do you make about the fact that despite axing that £1.4 billion yesterday, David Lammy has just found £600 million to give to President Zelensky in Ukraine? Have we got our priorities all wrong? Let me know the usual way. But now it's your headlines, and here's Sophia Wenzer.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your headlines. Rishi Sunak's reignited the battle against Labour on its move to axe the winter fuel allowance for millions of pensioners. Continuing his focus from last week's exchanges at Prime Minister's questions, the Conservative leaders pushed Sir Keir Starmer for details on the impact of the cuts.
We know why he's hiding the impact assessment. The Labour Party's own previous analysis claimed that this policy could cause 3,850 deaths. So are the numbers in his impact assessment higher or lower than that?
However, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer pushed back, claiming his government was having to clear up the Conservatives' mess.
Because of the tough decisions that we're making to stabilise the economy, we can make sure that the triple lock shows that increases in pensions will outstrip any loss of payments. But before he complains about us clearing up his mess, perhaps he'd like to apologise for the £22 billion black hole.
This morning, our political editor Chris Hope asked the Chancellor Rachel Reeves if the looming October budget will be more bad news for pensioners.
We've committed to those bus passes, to free TV licences for those entitled and free prescriptions. But we've also committed to the triple lock, not just for 1 year, but for the duration of this Parliament. And that means that pensions will continue to rise by whichever is higher, 2.5% inflation or average earnings. That means that pensioners have £900 more this winter and likely another £460 from next April.
Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary has just announced over £600 million worth of support for Ukraine. David Lammy and Antony Blinken are currently in Kyiv, calling it a critical moment in the war with Russia. Their joint visit follows reports that Joe Biden will lift a ban on British Storm Shadow missiles being used on Russian territory after Iran supplied ballistic missiles to Russia. The Business Secretary has unveiled a multi-million-pound package to support Tata Steel's shift to greener production. Jonathan Reynolds blamed the previous government for failing to make critical decisions. However, the Conservatives are accusing Labour of extending a deal they once criticised. Jonathan Reynolds says the new agreement includes investment opportunities to secure long-term jobs, despite up to 2,800 positions being at risk.
Tata are agreeing to offer a comprehensive training programme for any employee as an alternative to those at risk of compulsory redundancy. This would be on full pay for 1 month and then £27,000 a year per employee for 11 months. And Tata will fund all of these costs. Employees will be able to choose from recognised qualifications to develop sought-after.
In other news, no-fault evictions could soon be history as the government prepares to ban Section 21 evictions. The Renters' Rights Bill, set to be introduced today, promises sweeping changes to protect England's 11 million renters. It will also force private landlords to take faster action on unsafe housing conditions. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner says the bill will overhaul renting and tackle unfair practices. But landlords warn the reforms must be fair on both sides. And in the US, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have met again at a 9/11 memorial event in New York after facing off in their first and possibly only presidential debate last night. The showdown began with a handshake but quickly took a turn when Harris mocked Trump's rallies, accusing him of boring his crowds. Trump hit back, defending his popularity and attacking Harris on her immigration stance and economic policies.
She's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it?
Meanwhile, Harris blamed Trump for nationwide abortion restrictions and the Capitol riot while questioning his fitness for office.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Those are the latest headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. We've got a huge hour ahead. Let's get cracking. Now, we've heard from the Prime Minister today after a tense day yesterday in the House of Commons as MPs, of course, controversially voted to cut the winter fuel payments for British pensioners. The Conservatives and the Reform Party are vowing to name and shame Labour Party MPs who voted, in their words, to freeze your grandparents, as ministers doubled down on their decision to scrap those winter fuel payments for 10 million British pensioners. Well, I'm joined in our studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, so this story broke. The voting came out exactly 24 hours ago on this show, and the evidence is clear. 348 of 348 who voted to scrap the winter fuel allowance They were all from the Labour Party, 100% of them, and people have been going into our inbox today going crazy, saying this is the sort of thing that the Labour Party would always say is the nasty kind of thing the Conservatives have done. Now, 5 minutes into power, they're the ones who look like the new nasty party.
Because it wasn't in the party's manifesto. It was in previous manifestos, not this one. Now, Labour say it came to them as an idea to plug the £22 billion black hole in the government accounts, forgive me, the government accounts when they came into office. But this idea wasn't even voted on in the election, wasn't mentioned by anybody in the Labour Party, and that's why everyone is so cross. It was announced almost without any warning in that mini budget towards the end of July, and that's why everyone is so surprised and so cross about it. There's all sorts of double standards at play here. One big issue is the MP expenses.
Yes.
Now, we remember back to the Telegraph story back in 2009.
The story you broke.
Which I was part of the team that broke it. But what it is if you have to be an MP, the state supports you having a second home in the capital if you live outside, basically the M25. You can't get in and out of London quickly. That's okay. Rachel Reeves, of course, is an MP from outside of London. She has a second home, but the Telegraph revealed today that we as taxpayers have been picking up the tab for her £4,000 tax bill over the past 5 years. That's not all. There's 100 or so Labour MPs also had several £100,000 of benefit on us paying their heating bills. That annoys people. I asked Rachel Reeves about this very matter in an interview earlier today. Here's what she had to say.
I recognise that I earn more than average families in Britain, but I'm also determined in this position to protect the most vulnerable, which is why the winter fuel payment will continue to be paid to pensioners on pension credit. And indeed, unlike the previous government, we are working to ensure that everybody that's entitled to pension credit gets it.
So I asked then Rachel Reeves, I had asked her, how can you feel the pain as an MP receiving this support from the state for your second home when others don't get that? And that's what she had to say. So she's clearly saying that all MPs get the same benefit. But I think many people will be entitled to ask, are you not insulated, to use that awful pun about insulation, from this dreadful cut to people's keeping them warm this winter?
Has to be said, excellent question. Well done holding power to account. And it did look like you wrong-footed her there. Another piece of investigation that came out from GB News overnight, looking at some of those 348 Labour Party MPs who voted to scrap the winter fuel duty. Astonishing, Chris, 70 of those seats are new Labour seats, so they swung from the Conservatives or the SNP. And the data, 90% of pensioners in those seats are set to lose their winter fuel allowance. And when you look at the geographical spread, there's lots of those seats in Northumberland and Scotland, where it gets colder. There's lots of seats in relative poverty. This could be a moment, a poll tax moment, something that could haunt the party for many years to come.
I think back to the increase in state pension of 75p under Gordon Brown. They had to deal very quickly with that to push that one down. The tuition fees drama with the Liberal Democrats still being talked about 12 years later by people about Liberal Democrats' record in government. Will this be the albatross hung around the necks of this Labour government? And it certainly will be in one of the first or top page, certainly, of attacks on this government when its MPs are up for election in 4 or 5 years' time.
And we're already seeing the Conservative Party is putting literature out in these seats. They're trying to target every...
I'm not surprised by 90%. I mean, these are swing seats. Many of them, Reform will be second. They'll be making a lot of hay in that. We had Lee Anderson on yesterday. He's worked out how many pensions in his seat are now £300 poorer per year.
86%, I think he said.
That's right, by the... So, yeah, 90% or so, but that seems about the average. I did ask the Chancellor earlier, there's a big push to get poorer pensioners to sign up for this pension credit. 800,000 haven't signed up for it. I said, if they all sign up for it, wouldn't it wipe out the saving, the £1.5 billion saving, justified by helping this economic black hole? And she basically accepted that, saying she's very keen to get everyone who needs a benefit to get it, rather than it to go to everybody else.
It would more than wipe it out. And another key point, of course, David Lammy just found £600 million for Ukraine. Stick around, because I'd like to put this now to somebody at the sharp end of this debate, somebody who's going to be directly, personally affected by this, and that is the former newspaper editor Don Briggs, who joins me now. Don, welcome to the show. I understand that, of course, you're a pensioner yourself, and I want to get from you, Don, the personal impact of these political decisions made far, far away. You're staring down the barrel of a long, cold winter. Don Briggs, how might this decision to axe the winter fuel allowance impact you?
Well, I'm as much concerned about people who are in worse circumstances than we are. I mean, I've been caring for 11 years now for my wife, Marion, and soaring costs of care have forced us. I mean, I didn't claim the state carers allowance for 8 years until soaring costs forced me to do so, you know, putting in a stair lift at thousands. And I've just had to have a wet room replaced so that I can shower my wife. But things like that, carers, hairdressers, all those kind of things, up to 4 washers a day, you know, and having to keep the house on at the temperature in the house where my wife and I are sitting. For her sake, it's around 22 degrees a day to keep her comfort, despite she's now sitting even so with a blanket round her knees. But I think, you know, pensioners made this country, the people today. I mean, we're 87 and 88, but it's pensioners who made this country stable and prosperous. You know, they're the ones who've scrimped and saved and gone without. And I mean, my wife is cared for 3 girls for 16 years before she went and found work again. She's on a pittance of a state pension. That's another thing as well. So I mean, but my own feeling is it should be means tested, yes, if it has to be, but it should be set at a level somewhere perhaps around the level of the poor train drivers who had to have a fat pay rise from this government when they're on 70,000 a year.
Mm. Now, Don, could I also ask you about something else? Winter fuel allowance, of course, is one thing, but also it was announced pretty soon after the Labour Party got into power. They were scrapping the notion of the care cap. If you remember, the previous government had an £86,000 social care cap in place. It was called the dementia tax when Theresa May tried to bring it in. But in fact, the Labour Party are now planning something similar. So there could be, even those who did the right thing, even those who saved all their lives to take care of themselves or their loved one, could see that money simply sapped away. Don Briggs, do you start to feel that to the Labour Party, pensioners simply don't matter?
Well, I would say that since Attlee in 1945, Labour governments have been disastrous for this country. And this one is going to be just the same. I mean, Blair set the Middle East alight for a start. I mean, Winston Churchill warned about lawyers as prime ministers. And we had Blair, and we've now got Starmer.
John,
Sorry.
Don, I'm also joined in the studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. He'd like to ask you a question.
John, you're a former journalist. You know readers. You know how they think. Do you think this will be quite damaging to the Labour Party? Martin Daubney was there talking about those figures showing so many issues there for Labour, new Labour MPs facing the choice to be made here by the government, with 90% in some cases of pensioners affected. Will there be a fallout, do you think, this Labour government? And can I ask, and how did you vote? Are you a Labour supporter or a different party?
Well, I voted. We have Esther McVeigh as our MP for Tatton, and she is what I would call a true Conservative with a small c. We had it not been for Esther McVeigh being there and her record as a good MP for the people of Tatton, I would have voted Reform. And so would my wife.
But you voted for the Conservatives at this time, Don.
Yes,
may I ask you, we spoke to a pensioner, a carer for her father earlier in the show, Catherine Plant, and we asked her, and I'd like to ask you now, if you could pass on a message, if you would like to say something to Sir Keir Starmer, what would you say?
I would say that he should think think about pensioners. There's an awful lot of them who are struggling and are fearful about the winter. I mean, today in the Western Mail here in South Wales, where we are, there is a report that 1 in 4 children are living on the poverty line. They're sleeping in mouldy beds or on the floor. Now, you know, this is all families. There's no help coming from pensioners to help them.
And Dom, may I ask you, we heard, so that the cost saving of this £1.4 billion in the grand scheme of things, of course, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money compared to a lot of the things you mentioned there, the pay rises, 5.5% pay rise, costing £10 billion for teachers and NHS workers. And in fact, we found out, Don, about an hour ago, that David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has just given an extra £600 million to Ukraine. When you hear things like that, and then compare that to yesterday's axing of the winter fuel allowance, do you think the political class has completely lost its focus, lost its priorities?
Well, yes, I do think it has, but I don't think that... I believe that we should be supporting Ukraine. If we don't, we'll have the Russians moving across Europe just as Adolf Hitler did. I mean, it's essential that... I mean, I've been talking to Esther McVeigh frequently for years about defence. We need defences, proper defences, and we haven't got them. I mean, if anybody lobs missiles at London and Manchester and Birmingham, there's no air defence there, is there?
OK, well, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. Don Briggs, you take care, stay warm, stay safe, and also love to your wife, Marion. Thanks very much for joining us on the show today, and thank you very much to you as well, Chris Hope, here in the studio. You get lots more on that story, of course, on our website. And thanks to you, GBNews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got breaking news and all of the brilliant analysis they come to expect from us here at GB News. Now it's time now for the Great British Giveaway, and the biggest cash prize we've ever given away, £36,000, could be yours, and that's like having an extra £3,000 tax-free in your bank account each and every month for an entire year. And here's all the details that you need to make it yours.
Watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming next, a new report shows training Ukrainian troops on British soil is draining a quarter of our ability to train our own soldiers. And with another £600 million going to Ukraine, have we simply lost sight of our priorities? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Michael found the recipe for success without going to university. Instead, he went looking for answers inside of a kitchen. The 22-year-old has just finished a level 2 course in professional cookery at UCB, a college in Birmingham.
When I started UCB, I was expecting to be so intense from day one, but it's not. It sort of builds up, so to the point where you get comfortable. And building that comfort is a huge part of becoming a chef, because you need to be comfortable being in your own skin.
This week, tens of thousands of students get their A-level results. The college wants them to remember university isn't the only option after school, and West Midlands Mayor Richard Parker agrees.
University is the right route for lots of our young people, but there are other pathways to getting access to qualifications that will give young people the skills they need to succeed in life.
Further education principal Rosa Wells says apprenticeships and technical courses are also great routes to a career.
Here at University College Birmingham, we offer vocational courses. These are hands-on technical courses that can give people a different opportunity, something different to school. So we've got brilliant facilities that really give students industry standard training.
A skills shortage across the UK means youngsters learning trades are desperately needed. 36% of job vacancies are due to shortages. The Labour government's new body, Skills England, has been created to bring training providers and businesses together with local and national authorities plus unions to target trade gaps and regional requirements. Michael's now finishing his qualification. Where he goes next is down to him.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, as the Ukrainian war approaches 3 years on, a major decision could be made with British missiles being used by Ukraine to strike Russia. Now, Foreign Secretary David Lammy and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken are in Ukraine to meet President Zelensky today as restrictions on using long-range missiles are being lifted. But the conversation has now moved on because today we've learned that Mr. Lammy has found an extra £600 million to give to Ukraine, taking now our total to £8.4 billion since the conflict started in 2022. And furthermore, a new report has come out saying that training Ukrainian troops on British soil is impacting our ability to train our own troops as they're using our facilities. So are we losing sense of our priorities? That's the conversation I'm about to have now with the former NATO commander and the geopolitical forecaster, Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Chris, always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. So it's an eye-watering sum of money, 8.4 billion, when you add an extra £600 million. Is this turning into a forever war that we should forever be funding?
Well, I'll tell you, it's good value for money, Martin. We're putting basically what is about a sixth of our defense budget into this war. Ukraine is fighting it for us, and we're depleting about 75% of Russian frontline capability on the ground. Now, we couldn't achieve that ourselves, I don't think, if we went to war with them tomorrow. We don't want to go to war. And part of this premium that we're paying is deterrence to say to Russia, look, we're serious. When we want to support our friends, we're going to do this. We'll do even more if you attack one of our allies. And we've got to be quite certain here that Russia, China, Iran and North Korea are cooperating with each other to keep the United States off balance, to maintain pressure on Europe and the Asia Pacific and the greater Middle East. And we're in the biggest global crisis since the end of the Second World War. And I'm afraid to say that, the money we're spending on Ukraine is a mere pittance compared to what we'd have to spend if we had to confront these people.
Of course, the mere pittance of £600 million is getting on for half of the money it would have cost for the winter fuel allowance, only axed just yesterday. So a lot of people in our inbox today, Chris Parry, are questioning the timing of this announcement. But bringing this back closer to home in terms of the military capability of our own armed forces, the report out today from the National Audit Office showing that we are unable to train our own infantry as much as we'd like for training purposes because we are training Ukrainian soldiers on our soil. Is this impacting our own armed forces already at Creekingport, the smallest army since the Napoleonic era? Is it now being undertrained thanks to the fact we're training up Ukrainian troops, not our own?
Yeah, there's no doubt that it's having an impact on our army. But if you ask our army what they're for right now, they don't really know. So whenever we talk about what the size of the army should be, the first question we need to ask is, what are we going to use it for? Is it going to be used to deter Russia, China, Iran and North Korea, or is it just going to be used as part of a humanitarian or peacekeeping type force? Until the army sorts out what its strategy is, there's no point in funneling a lot of money into the army. What we need right now, as your previous speaker mentioned, is the sort of things that can defend this country. Lord St. Vincent said something very interesting when he was asked by Pitt the Younger, the Prime Minister, whether Napoleon would invade. He said, look, I can't say Napoleon won't invade, but I'll tell you, they won't be coming by sea. Well, the fact of life is we're the furthest from any threat in Europe, Martin. If we get, our maritime, our air and our space aspects right, we're not going to need an army unless we want to deploy it on the continent of Europe.
But does that all point to the fact then that our role seems to be not to equip our own armed forces, not to be ready and able to fight if needed, but we're simply funding overseas armies to the sum of never-ending sums of money, £8.4 billion since January 2022. Chris Parry is an astronomical sum of money.
Yeah, just look at what we've done in the past. We used to fund Prussians, we used to fund Hessians to fight our wars on the continent. I'm telling you, it's good value for money. We're not losing people. And if we had to replicate that sort of military activity ourselves, it would cost us a lot more. Right now, the Ukrainians are fighting and dying on our behalf. And that 8.4 billion is nothing compared to the climate reparations of 11.3 billion that the government has chosen to give to various countries around the world.
A lot of people watching this show would say that money shouldn't be spent that way either. And it comes back to that basic conversation of should charity begin at home? Chris Parry, you're adamant this is money well spent. But I guess the big question is, how long can this carry on for? At the moment, it seems there's no end to it in sight.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Russia's creaking right now. It's had some battlefield successes in Ukraine. You've seen the incursion by Ukraine into Russia. The Russians don't really care about that, or the people who live there. They're concentrating on trying to win in Ukraine. My sense is that by the end of the year, this is going to come to a halt. But if we suddenly say, look, we're withdrawing support from Ukraine, the Russians go, yippee, thanks very much. We'll just carry on. But I think they're fighting themselves to a standstill. As I said, it's creaking in Russia right now. Now is the time to really apply the pressure and make sure the Russians think they can't win this.
OK, well, thanks for your opinion. It's always appreciated. Rear Admiral Chris Parry, thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. Now, lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. And have researchers found the holy grail on how to quickly recover from a hangover? If so, that'll be fantastic news for millions of boozers. But first, here are your latest news headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom at 5:30. These are your headlines. Labour is facing mounting pressure from within its own ranks to reverse cuts to the winter fuel payment. In today's exchanges at Prime Minister's questions, Rishi Sunak pushed Sir Keir Starmer for details on the impact of the cuts, which will see 10 million pensioners lose the payment. Despite the opposition, the Prime Minister insists it's necessary to fix a £22 billion financial shortfall. Meanwhile, this morning, our political editor, Chris Hope, asked the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, if the looming October budget will be more bad news for pensioners.
We've committed to those bus passes, to free TV licences for those entitled, and free prescriptions. But we've also committed to the triple lock, not just for 1 year, but for the duration of this Parliament. And that means that pensions will continue to rise by whichever is higher, 2.5% inflation or average earnings. That means that pensioners have £900 more this winter and likely another £460 from next April.
In other news, Foreign Secretary David Lammy said the West is listening carefully to Ukraine's needs amid calls to allow Kyiv to use long-range missiles in Russia. David Lammy and the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken are in Ukraine on a joint trip, calling it a critical moment in the war with Russia. Mr Lammy announced over £600 million worth of support for Ukraine, including aid to meet immediate humanitarian, energy and stabilisation needs. Back in the UK, no-fault evictions could soon be history as the government prepares to ban Section 21 evictions. The Renters' Rights Bill, set to be introduced today, promises sweeping changes to protect England's 11 million renters. It will also force private landlords to take faster action on unsafe housing conditions. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner says the bill will overhaul renting and tackle unfair practices. But landlords warn the reforms must be fair to both sides. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3037 and €1.1833. The price of gold is £1,929.50 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's closed the day at 8,193 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Pretty chilly out there today, and it's only going to get colder overnight as the showers fade and many of us have clear spells. Still some pretty heavy showers around at the moment, though, particularly over the West Midlands, northwest England and Wales. A rumble of thunder, even a bit of hail, and there's some snow over the tops of the mountains across Scotland in the showers. But they are fading in much of southern Scotland, eastern England, southern England. Here we'll by and large have a dry night with those lengthy clear spells and temperatures dropping 4 or 5 degrees. That's in towns and cities. Many rural spots not far off freezing. And across northern Britain there will be a frost for many in the countryside. So yes, a pretty cold start to Thursday, but a sunshine will soon start to lift those temperatures. By and large, a fine start across East Anglia and the southeast. There will again be plenty of showers packing in across north and west Wales and parts of northwest England. A few for the north and the east of Northern Ireland. Grazing the west coast of Scotland, there'll be a few showers, but the central belt generally dry. Much of the east coast dry. Showers still coming in on a fairly brisk northerly wind, but those winds won't be as strong. It won't feel quite as cold during tomorrow. There'll be a few more showers tomorrow compared to today across southwest England, but they'll be pretty well scattered here and across Wales, and certainly for a good part of central and eastern England. Many places will be dry. By and large, a dry day in southern Scotland as well. But it won't be warm, even with a bit of sunshine. Temperatures struggling to get to 15, 16 degrees. The winds, though, will be lighter than today, as I mentioned, so it'll probably feel a little less cold tomorrow. But tomorrow night, again, as the showers fade and the sky is clear, we are going to see those temperatures tumbling. Even more of a frost likely on Friday morning. High pressure, though, is moving in across the south. That'll bring a lot of fine weather through Friday and the weekend. These weather fronts will bring some wetter weather and windy weather across the north and west into the weekend. But it will also, by then, start to warm up.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays continue on the M42 heading north through the West Midlands. The inside lane still closed off between junction 6 at the Birmingham Airport turn-off up to the M6 interchange. Overrunning roadworks that were scheduled to finish this morning are still underway. In Hertfordshire, the A1M is closed now, northbound at junction 6, the Welland exit at the scene of an accident. On the M40 in Buckinghamshire, one lane's closed northbound 4 to 5, just north of High Wycombe. A car's caught fire in the inside lane and recovery work is now underway. In southwest London at Feltham, the A315, the Staines Road, closed for accident investigation work off Hounslow Road. On the M5 in Somerset, heading north, the inside lane on that 3-lane stretch closed off the junction 25 at the Taunton exit. I can see highways are on scene where emergency bridge repair works are underway. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back, 5:38. We're on the final furlong with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, as Labour's first budget approaches, businesses around the country are fearful that those with the most assets could be the hardest hit. Now, reports suggest that the Labour Party are considering changes to inheritance tax, and there are currently several exemptions from that, including on agricultural land and family businesses, but these could be lifted to include them. Now, if death duties return to family businesses, many fear they will not survive. Will this Keir Starmer government lift these exemptions to address the financial black hole? And in particular, could that hammer farmers? Well, to discuss that, I'm now joined by the dairy farmer, Bruce Jobson. Bruce, welcome to the show. Always an absolute delight to have your company. Lots of eyes are all on how this so-called financial black hole might be filled, and the conversation now is precisely as we've been saying. It could be putting inheritance tax on farms, on businesses. Bruce Jobson, if that happens, what would it do to the farming industry in Britain?
Thanks for the invite, Martin. I'm a little bit croaky because I've been in hospital, but I think the shock of this announcement caused this to have anaphylactic shock in my throat, because this will finish farming off. Within 20 years, there won't be any family farms left. The Labour government tried this in the 1970s, and it was a disaster. So what we're going to be facing with is the worst crisis that will happen in farming. It's bad enough because if you have to sell your assets, you're not going to have a viable business. Now, when we spoke earlier this year, Martin, I did raise the DEFRA figures, which shows that farming incomes have dropped 77% from cereals, dairy 78%, and general cropping around 50 to 60%. So farming as a business is virtually non-profitable. Now, once they introduce this tax, if it is going to happen, and I have written about this, speculation, but if it is introduced, farmers are not going to survive, because if you have a major company, owned by a board, you will not pay death duties, in the case of that. But in farming, what you've actually got is the asset is the farmland. Now, I did figures, and if you're going to have to sell roughly 25% of your assets just to pay the tax, and now a lot of farmers have got mortgages on top of that, and they've got massive overdrafts, because tractors cost £200,000. There's no way that farming can survive. The bank will not be able to accommodate the overdrafts. They want to know how we're going to get our money back, how are they going to be protected. If it's introduced, we'll have the same effect as what we had in the 1970s. It will wipe out what happened. Small farms, small holdings got wiped out because of this in the 70s, and it was eventually, got rid of. But farming is in a very perilous situation. And if this goes ahead, it's going to finish a lot of small farm businesses, because they can't afford to continue. And the other thing is, who is going to buy it? If you're going to get taxed every time that you buy an asset and you're going to buy a farm or increase the farm production, everybody's going to say, hang on a minute, we can't continue in this way. So it's going to be an end game for many, many farms.
Bruce Jobson, so Margaret Thatcher got rid of Harold Wilson's 1974 plan, precisely as is being optioned here in 1986. But as you're right to say that a lot of small holdings were lost. This time around, Bruce, who do you think would buy up that land? I mean, the two obvious answers are big corporations, perhaps foreign corporations, and the government themselves, Bruce. The government is after land to build on. Is there perhaps an ulterior motive going on here? No farm, no food. It means more importations. It means a lack of food sovereignty. Could it mean what? More wind farms, more solar farms? Perhaps the government doesn't really want farmers around.
Well, I think that's the case. As I say, we've dropped from 80% self-sufficiency in 1980 to 50 to 55% now. They're introducing this 20%. They want to get rid of effectively 20% of farming for environmental purposes. So we're going to get another hit with that. It's all right importing food, but who's going to pay for all this? It's the consumer. And I'll tell you now, Martin, come the back end of this year, food prices will increase because farmers again are going to be hit with energy costs. Electricity prices are going up. This is going to happen. But farming has to, somewhere along the line, have a reset. And I can't see it happening. Traditionally, Martin, the Labour administrations have been very proactive towards farming. And unfortunately, if this comes in now, it will finish it. That's the end game over. It's all right doing that. But the big companies, let's just say the airlines and all these other companies, some of these ethical companies who are buying up land, paying 3 times the value to place trees on land and doing away with good productive land, are effectively the only people who will be left who can afford to buy farmland and will plant trees. Farming will be used as the whipping boy once again. Now, down in Australia, New Zealand, they're international companies are buying thousands of acres of land down in New Zealand to plant trees. It's happening all over the world. But in this particular country, we're down to 50%. It's going to take another 20% of agricultural land out. Where are we going to get the food supply from? And sadly, the old pensioners are going to suffer again, not just from the heat, but they're going to suffer this year because prices will increase.
Okay, Bruce Jobson, well, for a fellow with a sore throat, mate, it was hard to get you to stop there. Magnificent, as ever. Great to have you on the show, and keep fighting for Britain, keep farming. Beautiful stuff. Thank you very much, Bruce Jobson. Now, next, experts have discovered apparently a safety shot that could ensure hangovers are a thing of history. I'll be the judge of that. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
With record temperatures expected this week, how do zoos keep their cooler creatures cold? Well, at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, the polar bears are enjoying a vegetable ice block.
Polar bears, they do have quite a variety of different temperatures that they naturally do find. Once they're moving off these polar ice caps, they are in the likes of down in the areas of Canada, Hudson Bay. Naturally, they were finding polar bears in 35-degree temperatures year upon year. So they are very much used to warm temperatures and heat waves as such. What you'll tend to find is they'll go for a good swim and then go for a snooze in the shade thereafter.
Not wanting to miss out, the sea lions are treated to a huge fish lolly.
In the hot weather, it's really important to give them ice because these guys, they don't drink salt water. These pools are actually saltwater pools. They actually drink fresh water. They've got 2 freshwater pools in their house, but again, being able to provide that in their outside enclosure is also really important. So offering them ice with their fish is not only enriching, but it's actually beneficial to their welfare as well.
Other animals like the lemurs will be basking in the sun, but also cooling down with frozen sweet potato.
So we've got 3 different species of lemur here. They come in all different shapes, colours, sizes, but they are native to Madagascar. Madagascar can get quite hot, understandably, so throughout the cold months here in Yorkshire, we do give them a nice heated house all year round, but especially making sure it's nice and warm in the winter for them. And it does mean that in the hot spells as well that we're able to keep our eyes on them and try and give them things that make them a bit more comfortable with that incoming hot weather as well.
The frozen food on offer here certainly has the seal of approval on what could be the hottest day of the year.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:47. This is the final furlong. In fact, it's last orders with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, maybe the advice that's probably come too late for most of you about how to avoid a hangover. Well, the cure could finally be here, because experts have claimed they found the Holy Grail, a new safety shot which can reverse the horror of a deadly, crippling hangover. Now, I wish that we'd had this around 20 years ago, but is it too good to be true? Well, these things usually are. Let's talk about it now with the psychotherapist Lucy Beresford, who joins me on the show. Lucy, welcome to the show. So if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. That's the usual thing about drinking. But now we have learned about a so-called miracle product that could save us from those paralysing hangovers. Tell us more.
Yes, well, this product claims to be able to metabolize alcohol that much more quickly. Now, I can't quite see how that's actually true on the basis that we individually metabolize alcohol according to our own metabolism. And some people process alcohol more quickly than others, which is why the majority of people do end up with hangovers the following day. And there are loads of old wives' tales about the best way of dealing with this. But this particular product has certain minerals and certain ingredients in it that the manufacturers claim will actually speed up the process of getting that alcohol out of your system. But what happened to personal responsibility? What happened to the idea that you would say, I'm not going to have a hangover tomorrow morning because I'm actually going to be careful about the amount that I drink? I'm very nervous about actually putting all of the responsibility into this one little can.
Yeah, and as you say, it is a little can. It looks like a sort of Red Bull-sized can. It's called Safety Shot. It's currently on sale in America. I think it is coming to the United Kingdom relatively soon. It launched in America just before Christmas. It sold out immediately. Cynical timing, right, to drop it just before the Christmas knees up all over December when you know you're going to go to a surefire market. But apparently there is some science behind this. The Centre for Applied Health Sciences in the US said this beverage can get to work in as quick as 30 minutes. It's got vitamins in it. It's got botanical ingredients and minerals, and it helps, they claim, to speed up the body's ability to process alcohol. So it gets those hangovers gone quickly. Lisa Beresford, got to say, I don't believe a word of it. I've heard all of this before. I think this is a cynical market employ. Tell me I'm wrong.
I think you might be right. I think, a bacon sandwich always really does it for most people. But it is about that personal responsibility. And my worry is that people would be overly reliant on the product, and they might imagine, if they see the marketing, that it happens effectively within 30 minutes, that they might actually do something like drink drive. They might think, oh, this is fine. I'm actually not going to have the alcohol in my system. And it's not going to process the alcohol in that way. It's just going to stop you, if it works at all, from maybe having a really intense hangover or being really dehydrated. The key for actually getting over a hangover, if you have to drink alcohol at all, is to try to hydrate yourself as much as possible. And to be fair, there are plenty of other products on the market that do that really effectively. We know, for example, products that are marketed towards people who go to the gym, who do a lot of exercise, because you want to replenish all of those salts in your system. But the psychology of this is you're outsourcing your own recovery to a tin. And I just can't see how that's going to do you any good in the long run.
Lisa Beresford, as you know, there is only one hangover cure, and that's Guinness. Sorry, I mean, don't drink in the first place. Don't drink in the first place. And, of course, time is your friend. I'm sure, though, this could massively catch on because, hey, just like fat jabs, everybody just seems to want a quick, miracle, lazy cure. Thanks for joining us. Lucy Beresford, psychotherapist. Maybe it's time for you to go and get yourself a nice little G&T. Thank you very much. Now, then, I've had loads and loads of your says in throughout the show, and the topic's really got you going. Two of them, of course, is the winter fuel allowance being cut yesterday. That's a story that we were not allowed to go away. And secondly, David Lammy giving £600 million extra to the Ukraine today after that controversial dropping of the winter fuel allowance. Let's get a few of those in now. Michael says this: I believe the Labour Party have now played their hand, and I don't think they'll ever be forgiven for it. The only upside is that they might not get elected again. Ken has this: so we have a £22 billion black hole. Pensioners are losing their heating money. Where on earth have we found all these millions today for both Tata Steel and Ukraine? So Tata Steel, 500 million, Ukraine, 600 million. That's 1.1 billion today for two new projects, 1.4 billion down the tube yesterday. That was the cost of the winter fuel allowance. You do the maths. Where are the priorities in this country? Charlie says this: the Labour Party should be made accountable to detail the black hole of 22 billion. We're just having to take their word for its existence at the present. They keep hammering the Tories, but it was them who voted against every policy or idea. And finally, Martin says this on the idea of giving fat jabs to fat kids, to 6-year-olds. He says jabbing fat 6-year-olds now, same old story, create a problem and then ride in with a solution. Where are all these fat kids 100 years ago? Ban processed foods and start teaching parents and kids how to cook. Now, that is common sense. William adds this: pensioners working their whole lives only to get shafted when they're at their most vulnerable. Britain, to me, feels like an absolute disgrace. And I've got one quick one here from Phil, who says this: look after your elderly and your elderly will look after you. This country seems to have forgotten that pensioners made this country and we should take care of them. You know, you're absolutely right. Thanks for that, Phil. You know, you can judge a country, you can judge its humanity by how we take care of our eldest and our frailest. And I think you'd agree that seems to not be working at the moment. Spoke to a couple of wonderful pensioners on today's show who feel let down by a country they've paid into all of their lives. We're the People's Channel, and we're going to keep making sure that we have your backs and we hold power to account. That's why we're here. Thanks for all of your messages today. Thanks for getting in touch. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m, of course. Up next is Jubes & Co. And tonight it's hosted by the magnificent Bev Turner. Then, of course, it's Nigel Farage after that. And then it's State of the Nation with Jacob Rees-Mogg. See you tomorrow. Get in touch. And
looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, time for your weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Pretty cold out there this evening. Temperatures are going to fall further through the night. Yes, there will be a touch of frost, particularly in parts of the north in the countryside, thanks to the winds coming around this area of low pressure all the way down from the Arctic, hence why we do have the chill at the moment. There's a fair few showers still around this evening, but for many they'll tend to fade. We'll keep some going in northern Scotland, a few for the north of Northern Ireland, northern parts of Wales, northwest England, but elsewhere many areas dry and clear, and the wind's easing a touch overnight, which is why those temperatures will tumble down to 4 or 5 degrees in towns and cities, but rural spots, particularly in the northern half of the UK, likely to be close to or a little bit below freezing to start Thursday. So yes, a chill in the air tomorrow morning, and there will still be showers in the air as well coming in across northern Scotland. Still a fairly brisk wind, but not as lively, not as gusty as the winds have been through the day today. Those breezes will bring a few showers across the northern parts of Northern Ireland, plenty packing in across Wales, although the south coast probably dry, and a good part of England having a dry, fine and sunny start to Thursday, albeit with that chill in the air. Now, as we go through the day, we'll see the clouds bubbling up a little bit, but I don't think we'll see as many showers as we've seen through the course of today. It's still plenty for Wales and a few more coming into southwest England and across northern Scotland, but much of southern Scotland dry, and large parts of eastern England and the Midlands also staying dry and dodging the showers with some sunny spells. But despite a bit of sunshine, temperatures on the chilly side. Similar values to today, but at least the winds tomorrow will be a little lighter. Lighter still on Friday, and even again likely to see more of a frost on Friday morning. Much of the country, though, will be dry and fine on Friday. We will see rain coming into the northwest. The wind's picking up here as well. That's a sign of a change. Things turning wetter across the north into the weekend, staying dry in the south and slowly warming up.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays continue heading north up the M42 through the West Midlands from junction 6 and the Birmingham Airport turn-off up to the M6 interchange, where overrunning roadworks that were scheduled to finish this morning are still taking place. It's taking about an hour to get through. And just north of Manchester city centre, the A664, the Rochdale Road, is closed following an accident. In South London at Dulwich, the South Circular has been shut near to Croxted Road at the scene of a collision. Police are on scene. And in South West London at Feltham, the Staines Road remains shut. Accident investigation work is underway at Hounslow Road. In Wiltshire at Warminster, the A362 remains closed for accident investigation work near to the Whitbourne Springs turnoff. And onto the train. Services are a stand between Peterborough and Stevenage because of a trespass incident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account.